Dear Lord, we come before you at this time asking for your blessings. We ask to be reawakened to the greater truth of your presence with us. We ask for a special blessing here, Father, through the Lord Jesus Christ. And that consciousness we know as the traveler also work to lift any karma or imbalance that may affect anybody in this room or anybody on this planet. And Father, we do open to receive special assistance at this time from the Archangel Gabriel and all those masters of light that would support us in this action. Father, we do ask that you recognize the sincerity in our hearts that we bring forward at this time, seeking, questing, asking for the greater revelation of your truth in our hearts and in our lives. We thank you always for this chance to serve and the blessings that are already. Amen.
So I'm Alicia, by the way. Just wanted to share with you a little bit about what this first beautiful gathering came out of. Many years ago, I believe it was in Madrid, John Rogers, suggested to Michael that he write a book about the origins of his work and about healing and his work. And he suggested that Michael do it the way J.R. wrote his books, which was to do groups and then record the groups. And also J.R. described to him how he saw Michael working with groups. And this was many, many years, goes back a long time. And it's time. And here you are. I have the privilege of being with Michael for 15 years, and there's been so many times where he would start speaking extemporaneously from the Spirit. And so many times I just was overcome with gratitude and a feeling of, I so wish this could be shared. And so I prayed that many times just because it was extraordinary, and here you are. So welcome to our little intimate chat here, and I can tell you from living with him and loving him that Michael lives what he teaches. He absolutely breathes and lives and is directed by Spirit and has extraordinary, extraordinary loving for you, as do I. And here's Michael.
Hi. Well, I've been putting this off for a while. And not because I didn't think I could do it, because the truth is I don't really do it. It's really the Spirit that does it, and those that work in the Spirit. And it's just time. The Spirit is moving on the planet in a way that I just haven't seen before. And it just came to me that it's time to share a lot of this stuff that I know. But more than that, what I mostly know is how to get out of the way and let the Spirit come through. So that's what I figured today is going to be about. Got a little prepared material, which we are going to do, which was a big stretch for me. That's the hardest thing for me to do, because even though it seems like I know so much, I really don't, because it goes right through and it's gone. And but if I thought, if nothing else, what I could offer people is sort of a view into my world in terms of how I look at healing, how I work with a person, how I approach each consciousness. There's a master form that oversees what I do that I haven't talked much about. Jer talked to about, my wife may know about it. And that one kind of just takes care of everything, but it has a form, it works, it has a process. And so many people over so many years have said, would you teach me? Would you show me? I want to do what you do. And my point of view is everybody can do what I do, just surrender, get out of the way. And hold on, because it's a wild ride. So that's pretty much where I'm going to go. I'm going to work off a little bit off of sort of a PowerPoint presentation I'm going to share, and I don't know how long that's going to take and how much in depth I'll go with that. And then there will definitely be a point where we'll do questions and sharing and those kind of things. I'm hoping, but this is just my personal hope, that the sharing can go more into the depths in relationship to what the PowerPoint is about, is more of the depths of the underlying factors that are at play in our lives and in healing and in the shifting of consciousness. Now, I'm a spiritual counselor, so when I talk about healing, I'm not as a doctor or a medical thing. So body healing is always sort of the last thing that I'm looking at. And yet it takes place, not as a goal, not as an intent, but simply as a byproduct of the changing of consciousness, which then creates the change in energy, which then overflows into the physicality, and we get the change that we've all, well, I shouldn't say we all, but I'm sure most of us have experienced before. So we'll go down that road. There will be questions. I'm obviously not going to talk to everybody or work with everybody. In the process of working with people, I'm going to try and work with the whole group. So you may hear me talking more about what I'm doing, the things I'm seeing, awarenesses I have. One of the things John Roger also told me that it was years ago, he told me that I'm here to teach inner knowing and intuition and how to open to that. So that's always been a bit of a mystery to me. How do I teach that? But then one thing that I recognize by talking about it and making more conscious the process of what's going on in the metaphysical. And those of you who've been to some of the sharings that we've done before in the fundraisers, the Super 2 and the Founders Dinners, and somewhat at Living in Grace have seen where we'll talk more about what's going on. That there is a greater thing going on, and going on for all of us. And so sometimes if our awareness is touched, oh, wow, Jesus is in the room. What's it like for me to know the Spirit is moved? That Jesus came present. How could I know that? How could I be more conscious of that? And that could be a beginning of a doorway into higher consciousness, of being able to take the higher consciousness that many people are gaining and apply it so that it becomes functional and usable in each of your lives. And then with practice becomes a staple of how you live. And that's kind of my intent in all of this. I don't have a pure formula of how we're going to go. I just am here. God said do it, so here I am. So right now I'm waiting on the Spirit. There's an angel here that wants to work with one of you in the room. And here I am trying not to do medical things. And anyway, there's an illness in your body, and the angels come to help you. So your thing is just be receptive to it. Now, that could apply to a lot of people. So I would go, well, it may not be me, but open to receive. For that person, there's a time lag in your awakening, because in another time you chose against the Spirit and you condemned yourself for that choosing. And it's created a hard-heartedness in you about you. And because of that, you've been inflexible inside yourself regarding your own process and being able to claim your own attainment and your own awakening. And so it's delayed you, but it's really you delaying you. God is not afraid of you making the same mistake. God wasn't even afraid when you made the mistake, because the mistakes of choosing against God are ultimately part of the growth towards God, part of the power of choice that we gain. And when we choose and choose amiss, the feedback that comes to us straightens our course and shows us where we really are meant to be. So though that angel came in for one, there's 45 other people in the room he touched, because everything I said applied to you too. Now this may be how this is going to go. So far this is how this is going. Like I say, I don't control this. But that is done. And now see, I didn't know what they're going to make me do. So when I worked with you there, and I talked about that angel working with you, for that person and for 3 other people in the room, there is a spiritual teacher that came in and worked as well. His name is Hippocrates, and he's a master of healing. So this could get interesting if I have to broadcast the whole show. But like I say, see, the funny thing is this goes on all the time. But most of the time in the seminars, so the person that angel came for has recognized what that was about. Hippocrates wants you to recognize that healing starts first in your heart. God is love. Thus, we are love. And in the loving, we are freed of all those things that reflect badly on the truth of God. So we choose the loving. And that, in the end, will be the essence of what I'm really going to talk about. Because that's the essence of how I do what I do, and that's the essence of how I've seen Spirit do everything it does. I will try and speak in this talk about things that I have experienced. If I haven't really experienced it, I probably will say, this is what I've been taught or shown. A lot of my teacher is John Roger. He's been my spiritual master in this lifetime and actually quite a few lifetimes. So I will reference things of him. I may remember to say, as John Roger says, if I don't, please understand that I have a enormous debt and gratitude to him for coming back for me and taking me into the heart of God. And in many ways, I'm coming back in here doing this, passing on the good work and sharing as he shared with me. And he took me home. I made myself available to that same action. So, okay, well, let's see where it goes. So, for those that want to just breathe in the Spirit, the Holy Spirit has moved in the room. So that when the Holy Spirit moves, it's sort of like I kind of go, anything goes, because there's nothing it can't do. But it will always do what's for us. And the heart knows this, so. All right, well, I'm out of my comfort zone, so. Let's do the PowerPoint and see what happens. This was my great exploration in trying to have something tangible. And we'll see if it works or not, but it'll give you a little, it's a way I'm going to try and, because a lot of people are visual and they have trouble remembering. I can't remember anything anyway, so for me it's a joke, because you can ask my wife. But we'll see what happens. We're going to play with this and see if it helps to bring... Let's take it off. Take it off. Oh, there's me. That's funny. That title, The Consciousness of Healing, I actually wanted to change it to A Consciousness of Healing, because my point of view is there are so many consciousnesses of healing. On this planet, there may be 7 billion, I'm hearing now. But all I'm going to reference is how I see it and how it's working for me. And the way I'm going to do it is going to be a very simplified version of try and talk about a metaphysical process that I go through every time somebody comes before me and I work with them, and the different things I'm looking at, and the different elements that I'm considering. So with that, let's give it a try. I've got this little thing, and I got a little laser pointer, so I'm feeling very high tech. That I will point at if it seems appropriate. So I'm just going to click on it. Oh, I got one of my quotes here. So that actually came to me when I was in college and feeling very lost about 35 years ago. But it's still true. Oh. The true purpose of all learning is to bring success in loving, which is the beauty of living. This is the beginning. So here I am in the world of form. Just means we're playing the game of being physical. So the first thing, if somebody comes to me, the first thing where I want to meet them and tune to them is in God. So I go to the highest connecting point I know, which is God. And one of the things I'm always looking at for myself, but I'm looking at for everybody I look at, and at every level I look at, is intention. Intention, J.R. once said, God is intention. And the power of intention so determines what's going on and really determines a person's ability to receive the power of spirit and the transformative possibility that's present. Where is their intention, and what are they intending in the action? So when in my experience of God, God is love. Okay, so the intention of God, love, because when I'm in God, that's all I'm aware of is the love. God just is love. So if looking at a person, then my consciousness would look there, and then I look to the spirit, to connect to the spirit, to meet them in spirit. And everybody can be met in spirit. As a matter of fact, everybody can be met in God, because we are all that. Meeting somebody in spirit is a little different than meeting them here, because in spirit we're all one. But still, that's the point of connecting I'm looking for first and foremost. I put the word loving next to spirit because there's movement in spirit. My experience in God is, it's not that there's no movement, but it's not a movement that could be described as directional. It's a movement of purpose, but the spirit's movement will have more direction. It'll have more of an intent to accomplish or intent to change or to move or to manifest. Next, we get the soul, which is particularized spirit. I mean, in a sense, the soul is God particularized so that God could know itself. God manifests this extraordinary creation of which this world is such a small fragment, and all the different levels of creation, all this reality, then particularizes itself in the soul, and the soul goes forward into all of this, experiences all of it, and then comes back out and adds the sum total of all of its experience into God and the knowing of God. So for the soul, the intentions I looked at them were immersion, because first of all, the soul is attempting to get involved in this world, or in the experience of creation, into the world of form. Assimilation, the soul wants to come in and drink it all in, take it in, experience what it's about, and then reunification at some point. The soul hopes to go back to God. So those are the intentions of the soul. So I'm trying to connect on that soulic level. Now, those are pretty ephemeral, but sometimes connecting on the soulic level is when I really start to get a sense of that person and their karma and their destiny. Because that's where it usually gets more unique. Because every soul has a unique destiny. So looking at a person from the soul level and looking at where their soul has gone and manifested could be very important in terms of what I can do for that person. Next, we get into the world of form, and here I put the ego, not because it's necessarily next, but for the purpose of understanding that, to me, the ego is our sense of separate self. I'll say that again. The ego I relate to as the sense of separate self. It's the identity of me, the identity of I, the identity of me as differentiated from the world around me. Now, the way I'm approaching a person, I look at the ego as constantly diverting the soul and the purpose and the energy of that person into the world, into the fantasies and the distractions that the world is pulling that person to. The ego, another word that I had for the ego that I could have put in there is pretension. The ego likes to pretend. The ego is about pretending to be what it wants to be and what it thinks it should be. The next thing I'm going to look, and this is really the level I look at most with a person, is consciousness. So consciousness, when I'm looking at that individual and their consciousness, that could include their basic self. For me, that could be what's in their unconscious. That would include, the mental, emotional, imaginative elements of themselves. So those of you who are familiar with, John Roger and the way he talks about the different inner levels, this kind of encompasses all that for me. But I'm talking about when I'm looking at a person, I'm not necessarily looking at that person and looking at what's going on for them in, the mental plane or the causal plane or the astral plane, though I can do that. But I do it all, I lump it all in the consciousness because it's done so quickly. I'm not necessarily going through all of it. I'm looking at it. It's looked at from the spirit, and it immediately goes to that thing which the spirit deems as most important. And then after consciousness, we get the energetic. So that's the underlying energy of life in the body. And it's interesting because the energetic is very much connected not only to the life force inside of us, but to emotion. Emotion, energy and motion. So everybody I'm looking at, once I've looked into their consciousness, I'm also experiencing or sensing the energetic. What's the energy like in that person? Do they have strong life force, weak life force? And this is done very quickly. And last, of course, is the physical. Just, is there a problem with the physical body? Now, there is no hierarchy in my mind about this, though it comes from this in the sense of the Spirit directs it. So I'm following a spiritual flow of what to address, but what to address is determined by the Spirit, not by my ideas or anything else. I don't automatically go, well, I better address the consciousness first. It's just, you could see it like a river flowing down, and my awareness flows with that river, and wherever it stops, that's where we start. See, in God, this is all the same. For our purposes and purpose of talking about it, we're going to explore it as something that is differentiated. But in God, it really is not. It is just one. It is just God. The more we realize that, the more we claim the power of God to both heal and transform every element of our life and every element of our world. So there's the basic dynamics of where we do. If we look at each level as we talk about this, we'll see that there's a lot of things that can affect these things. But I'm going to go to the next thing. So now we're getting into, once I've taken that basic look at the person, there's also another level that I'm looking at too. And this has more to do with the greater existence of that person, and that's the things outside that person that may affect that person and perhaps be having an impact on them at this time. So first and foremost is this one. It's called the Call Power. Now some people won't be familiar with that name. It's actually a name that comes out of India, and the sound current masters of India give it that name, the Call Power. The Call Power is basically has an assignment to keep us here. Its job, if you looked at the idea of that when a soul comes into this world, it's like he stepped into a movie theater, and the Call Power, as the usher says, sit yourself down, put on your 3D glasses. Here, put on these headphones for this ultra stereoscopic sound. And its job is to keep you in the movie. And therefore, I always put its intention is detention. Its game is keep you here. And it's very, very good at doing this. And it has this job really from God on high has given it that job. And from a certain point of view, when you can get by the Call Power, you've in a sense proven that you've learned to move beyond the Call Power in this world. And I'm actually not that familiar with the Call Power. It was interesting because for the purposes of this, to do this, I looked more into it than I normally do. I mean, I'm been totally aware of its effect, but I haven't had a lot of face-to-face with it, or inner face-to-face with it. It's just, I've just kind of known it's there. And, but for the purposes of this, I actually, as my wife can attest, spent about 6 hours out of the body looking and dealing more with this. So there's something else I'm going to add a little later about how, which may or may not be useful to people, but because it was new to me. It was a new understanding for me that was given from Spirit about how to deal with the Call Power. So the Call Power is the big obvious guy. However, there's another player in here that I have to look at with people, especially with a lot of you people that are doing the soul transcendence and doing the higher path and are really looking to finish your karma in this life. See, overcoming the Call Power is very much the passport of getting out of creation, getting out of the karmic law of cause and effect. But there's another player in the game that we must attend to. And this player wasn't always a player in the game the way this player is now. And that player is Lucifer. Now, I'm going to say in the beginning, but early on, Lucifer, as the anointed of God, was given the task of overseeing this whole action. He was the highest consciousness, and he was an architect of the design of how this whole plan of the soul coming into creation would work, and how the soul would come through and come out the other side and then share that great knowledge of what the soul had gained back into the totality of God. And so interesting, if we look at Lucifer from that source point in the beginning, we'd say, well, what was Lucifer's intention? Lucifer's intention would be information. To gain information for himself? No, but mostly to gain information for God. And that would be the purity of Lucifer's intent in the beginning. However, the way this was designed by Lucifer and the way it came about, let's just say it wasn't working the way it was intended originally. Souls were getting caught very much, and the progression of the souls through this design, the way this was set up by Lucifer, was not really working the way maybe it intended or was intended by God. Now, it's an interesting thing. What we're in right now, in terms of this creation within this creation, we could talk about 109 universes that I know of that are in this creation. Now, I haven't been in all those, so that's where I have to say it's not on my own experience. I've been in 42 of them very clearly, but the 109 I can't obviously say I've explored them all consciously because I haven't. But we could call this an issuance. So out of the great totality of God, God will issue forward a manifestation of an issuance. And the universes come into form. Down from God, the Spirit manifests, the Word, the emanation, the first emanation of God comes down like a vibration that echoes down into reality and becomes tangibilized into worlds of form. And this issuance is a very long pattern. And we're in one that will at some point finish, and when it's finished, it will probably, the same thing will happen that happened with the other issuances. I don't know how many issuances, they're all entirely. I have been and looked through 12 issuances. That's what I am aware of in my karmic journeys. And a lot of that I've looked at with John Roger because we looked at them together in other times. How long is an issuance? I do not know. For this particular one we're in at one point, I can say this talking to John Roger about it, and he just got the idea that this one was going to be about 375 billion years. So you start to understand the immensity of this process. So we don't know where in those 375 billion years we are. We don't even really know that it's 375 because that wasn't like to the date, to the dot. It was kind of like, it was just the sense and spirit. It's hard to know these things because in spirit there's a real timeless quality. Time can be sensed and known there, but it's not like here. So we're in the midst of that somewhere. But in the beginning, Lucifer was the guy in charge. But when it was seen it wasn't really working, there was an alternate brought forward. And there are many names that alternate could be called. I'm going to call it, for the purpose of what we're doing here, a name that's familiar to a lot of people. I'm not using that name for a particular religious affiliation, but it's the one that's the most commonly used, and that would be Christ, which is as the other one. And interesting, Christ came in as with a secondary plan. It's like a redemptive plan to try and shift and change the disturbances that weren't working in the Luciferian plan. And so Christ becomes the alternate. And it's interesting because with Christ we have information as well. In a sense, he comes in to improve upon the Luciferian plan. He comes in as the bearer to help us come to the information for the soul to complete its process and fulfill what it came to do with God. An interesting distinction that was suggested to me in the spirit, if I wanted to understand the difference between these two, Christ, and see they're both in information, but this is the way they explained it in the spirit, how I could look at that. Lucifer is about information, And Christ is information, or the action of informing. So Lucifer got very much caught up into the formalization of the law and the rigidity of it had to be this way. It had to be one way. And the inflexibility in the Luciferian plan has been the big drawback and why it hasn't worked. With Christ, the intent became different. The intent focused on the learning. If we're going for informing, which is learning, then, the true purpose of all learning, to bring success in loving, well, it's for the soul to learn to learn loving choice through all things, to learn the loving expression through all that it does. And so informing becomes a thing. So then under the Christ way of doing it, the important thing is the learning. And therefore there's a different kind of grace than the grace that was available under Lucifer. For example, if somebody were to have a life and maybe this is an example I've given before, but it's a good one. Let's say they have a life and they ride with somebody like Genghis Khan, and that's what they're a Mongol. What are they doing? Well, they're slaughtering and killing and pillaging, and so maybe they're good at this and they go out and they kill 500 people. Well, under the law, as Lucifer under that formation thing, their karma then is to be killed 500 times and to go through that 500 times. But under Christ, the emphasis is different. So let's say the person then starts to re-embody and they're getting bumped off. But along the way, there's learnings taking place. And that person is coming to realize in their consciousness that this is not the highest way. And it's recognized that the use of violence and force and killing is a lesser choice, and there's a higher choices to be made. Then from the spiritual world, under the Christ action, this gets looked at, and then what they usually do is they take that soul and they'll put them into a position where they have power again, and maybe the potential to choose the killing or the violence, and they see what the soul chooses. And if the soul comes to that point of, I could, but they don't do it. They refrain. This is a deeper understanding of what Jesus meant when he said, turn the other cheek. See, this is the turning the other cheek. It's choosing to move away from and beyond the impulsive, animalistic, reflexive response. If they make that choice and demonstrate the learning, then the karma, or the action that sits with people, is then pulled back from them. Now, it'll get worked out and balanced, but often how that'll be done, and this is really where for those people who work with what we call the traveler conscious have a real advantage because it's done really quickly there. But what will happen is that karma will get pulled off and it'll get worked in another level of consciousness. What might that look like? It might look like maybe for the next 6 months the person is really troubled in their sleep because every night they're going out and they're in some other dream level they're going through. They're just going through it. And they go, yeah, I'm not sleeping too well lately. I just kind of wake up really tired. And after about 6 months kind of done, they go, I'm better. It's all over. They just went through maybe, they may have gone through 480 or 490 deaths. But for the purposes of the Christ, the information, the important thing was accomplished. The learning took place. Under the Luciferian plan, that is not allowed. Now, Lucifer has a form of grace that he has brought forward too, but it's very different. His form of grace is called hell. So, those places we would call the purgatories, the hells, they are in a sense Lucifer's form of grace. Called, well, you really blew it so bad. Okay, well, we'll put you in this place where you can suffer and suffer and suffer and suffer and suffer and suffer and suffer, but it'll be faster than if you kept taking lives. The problem is that in the midst of those places, because the torment is so terrible and so difficult, people tend to create more karma while they're working karma. And this became a thing where souls were getting trapped in these places. And there were souls that were in here for immense periods of times. And there is times when in my work with John Roger where we have gone down into those places to get souls out of there that have been there for thousands of years, just caught. And paradoxically, because we're multidimensional beings, there'll be people that are caught in those hells while they're walking around here, having a life here, and yet inside of themselves they're in hell. So the hells are still going on, but that's not Christ's plan. So when Christ's plan was given ascendancy by the Father on high, the God, the ultimate supreme God, whatever you want to call him. Lucifer then, we could say, rebelled, or in a sense insisted that his plan could still work and was still the best plan. And so Lucifer didn't just go away. But what happened is Lucifer fell. Now the fall of Lucifer is not like that fast. That thing we just described there took a long time. There were successive phases of that fall. But what he did is he entered into the world of form. And he actually didn't really so much enter into the world of form as we know it. What he did is his fall or entering is into the substance or into the blueprint of form. If you could understand the way creation is laid out, when an issuance is brought forward, the intent comes from God on high and the instruments of his manifestation. Sometimes these are called the Elohim, or the creative spirits. It's almost like they paint a picture upon the canvas on this underlying substance. They paint the reality of the issuances on top of that. And that's what they do. And so what happens is that process of laying that all out, in a sense, there is an underlying fabric to all things. And so Lucifer, in a sense, in his fall, he fell into creation, but he also fell into this thing that is under creation. It's not, for the purposes of this, it's drawn below that. But the truth of it, it's kind of interpermeates it all, but it is vibrationally distinct. And that's where the hells are. It's in that other reality. So it's like another reality, but when you look around for it, it's hard to find and hard to place. So, but interesting, and this is another part where it gets interesting, when Lucifer was very high, he was recognized as the ultimate authority for the angelic host who served God's purpose under him. And so when Lucifer fell, and we use that word, he fell, many, many angels followed him. There's a passage in the book of Revelations which speaks about, and the dragon waved its tail, and a third of the stars of heaven fell. And that third of the stars of heaven that fell would be a third of the angelic world followed him down into creation and into this. But it's not necessarily that they're here and here and here. They're in this world, in this issuance, in this creative world. But a lot of them are in this underlying condition that's sort of below life, but life comes out of it. It's very hard to explain it in a way that makes sense, but that's where they are. And when Lucifer came down here, his intent was still this information to make his plan work, but he adopted another intent, and this is why it gets very tricky for us. He adopted the intent of retention. He intends to retain all of you and all of us, called all those souls that were originally operating under him. He wants to keep you operating under him. So he's working very vigorously to keep you aligned to his way of doing karma, his way of working stuff, the information way, the law. So he becomes another adversary, and a much more difficult adversary in many ways than the call power. The call power is everywhere. The call power is the 7 deadly sins. The call power is all the distractions. It's the it's the greed and the avarice. It's the porn sites. It's the glitter and the glamour. It's Academy Awards. It's all those things where we would chase our fulfillment and our purpose totally in worldly things. It's not that we're not to participate in the world, but the call power always tries to get us off center and get lost in it. And in a sense, the ego and the ego within us, in a sense, is the child of the call power in this, because it really is the call power's greatest single source of getting to us is through our egos. But Lucifer then, and those that followed him in, many of them, they then work actively in the metaphysical world, the more than physical world, as distractors. Now the funny thing is, isn't so much that Lucifer doesn't want you to get free. See, the call power's job is to detain you no matter what. Lucifer, he actually isn't against you getting free, but he wants you to get free his way. And there is a path of salvation, a Luciferian plan. It's just so darn hard that not that many people have done it. Now, not that many would be, if you knew how many had done it, you'd say, well, that's actually a lot, but not compared to how many souls have entered into this issuance. And it's a long, slow, arduous road. And in a sense, it's unnecessary. I mean, one of the things that John Roger quotes that I really loved when he said, evil is unnecessary experience. So, evil is unnecessary experience. Well, the Luciferian plan has a whole lot of unnecessary experience in it. So that's pretty much what happened. But when Lucifer came down, even though Christ had been given this empowerment over this issuance, because of Lucifer's action of asserting himself where he did through the whole fabric of the created world, souls were still getting caught here, and it wasn't really going the way God intended and the way Christ would have been commissioned to do. So what did Christ do? Christ came down and in a sense ascended or down to us, or descended, I guess, down into this creation to do world. And he put him down where Lucifer was, because he literally went down into all the hells. And this is the whole. Now, Christ, people often think Jesus. Well, Jesus is an adventing of that consciousness, is a correct way of understanding, but the Christ consciousness goes way beyond any singular man. It is a divine intent formed and given form to assist in God's fulfilling of God's purpose. And the actions of that master consciousness go way back before 2,000 years ago. And yet 2,000 years ago was a pinnacle time in the whole action of the thing, because it was, in a sense, at that time he really took on Lucifer and what it was. And what he did by enacting the drama of the chosen people as ordained by the call power at that time, he became their sacrificial lamb, fulfilled their law, went through the crucifixion and the whole thing of the 3 days in the tomb. What he did is he went down into the hells, and he freed every soul in there. That was millions and millions of souls. They just were caught in this endless loop of they just couldn't get out of that trap of suffering and then judging the suffering and hating the suffering and judging a God that would make them suffer, and so they were stuck. Christ brought absolution. So he brought absolution, which basically he said, I'm taking on the debt, I'm taking on the karma. And so he took that, and in doing that, he freed the hells. He cleaned them out. He cleaned out the jails and gave us a fresh start. Now the hells are still there, and there's still people going down in there, because this is still going on, this whole dynamic between Lucifer and Christ. They're still playing out to see which way will the souls lean, and which path will they follow. Will they do their karma under the grace of the Christ, or under the law that Lucifer is still insisting is a better way to go? So then, of course, Christ, he ascended, but once he came down and activated that allowed him to be much more active into this world, and his purpose to be more active into this world, and the hold of Lucifer was broken. So everything I just described to you is something I look at with everybody I talk to, because where are they on all of this? Because people will come to me to work with them, and I look at them spiritually, and they may be a fallen angel. Because a lot of the angels end up in human form. So many, many times I'm saying, I'm looking at them, they're a fallen angel. So part of my work with them is I may have to look in there and say, are they still caught under the Luciferian plan? And if so, what could be done to set them free? And so the karma that I'm directed to address is related to that. And many, along with all this, there are many, many challenges that are affecting them in their life in this world, and particularly in their spiritual life in this world, that have to be dealt with in terms of Lucifer or those that serve under Lucifer, and there are many. And when he descended, when he came down and fell, there were many great archangels that came with him. And these are very, very clever and very sophisticated. And they don't appear like dark demonic terrors in the night. They show up as, the devil comes dressed as a gentleman. It really understates how seductive and beautiful and compelling they can be. Because they still carry much of the magnificence of their former state, at least in terms of appearance. They are capable of manifesting themselves in almost any light that you would see them favorably. And when it comes to Lucifer, he can manifest himself in any form or any appearance or any light. So he could appear and look like Jesus or anybody else, and you probably wouldn't know the difference by appearance because he would just be so glorious. The thing he cannot do or he will not do is he cannot duplicate the love of God and the love of Spirit, because he's chosen a path away from that. And so in the inner worlds, the great differentiator is the love. So that's a basic synopsis of what I wanted to talk about. But that's everybody I come to, that's how I'm looking at them. Where do they fit into the whole that? See, and there's a lot in there and all of that. I'm just seeing if there's anything I missed or that was important about that. Now, a lot of this is stuff people already know, but this is a way I'm looking at it from the practical application of it in what I do with people. And it's no different if I look at a person through that understanding, whether it's a private client who comes to my house or if I'm doing a group sharing in this room or at some of the fundraisers we've done. It's the same way. That's what's addressed. It's like where is this person in all of that? And in a funny sort of way, you can understand that from God, the higher powers are looking at you through just like that. The Christ is looking at you. That's called the traveler consciousness is looking at you just like that, the same way. And it's working with you in that dynamic. We're fortunate because we're in a time of the turning where there's a balance that is really turning away from the planet being dominated under the Luciferian plan, and we're starting to see the emergence of the Christ plan coming more and more into, I won't say dominance yet, but we're coming to that time. This is really what the whole 2012 and the end of the Mayan calendar and the New Age and the Golden Age is about. It's not about everybody transcending the planet and going back to God. It's about the planet and those on the planet as a whole coming into this other way of working their karma and learning their lessons. And so we're at a real fortunate time because there's this tremendous outpouring from the spiritual world to accentuate this. In the spiritual world, Christ is meditating this world awake. I'm in awe of it because I see it and have experienced it. And that is probably what got me off my butt to do the things Jared had been telling me to do for 10 years. Because it's that time. That's what's going on. Wasn't there a poll that came out not too long ago that suggested that 85% of the people in the United States now believe in reincarnation? Where did that come from? It's like these greater powers are at work. Even if it's not true, what if it's only 60 or 70%? That's still staggering in the world that seems to be so dominated by limited perceptions of what's possible, it's real. It's like the Spirit is doing it regardless of all that, regardless of the media, regardless of those in power who say, this is it, and that's the work of the devil, and all. It doesn't care. The consciousness are being changed. And that's the power that we serve, and it's the power that I want to serve. I'm going to share one other thing that's prepared, because once I get started with questions, I tend to get lost. So we turn this off and we'll bring the flip chart up. Remember up there I was talking about the call power. And the call power has been something I have not really felt like I really understood. The Luciferian thing I've understood more and more because I've dealt with Lucifer a lot. Very directly, actually. But with the call power, it was like, it seemed more important to get understanding. And so I was asking about it because I knew I'd be doing this. And yesterday I got a visitation from a master who talked to me about the overcoming of the call power. And one of the things this master talked to me about is that in many ways you could understand Jesus and his life and the message of his life as really a demonstration and a messenger of how to overcome the Luciferian plan and to come into this higher Christ plan. But this other master, his life was really more a demonstration about how to overcome the distractions of the call power. And this master was named Buddha. And so there's an interesting thing about the call power, because when I was researching a little bit, there's not a lot to research about it, the name, so I had to go to the Indian masters and talk about it. But it was very interesting because one of the names for the call power is the time spirit. And that really was really interesting to me, because for me, in my own process, I learned that in awaking spiritually and gaining the ability to see spiritually and to be aware in the spirit world, the biggest thing I learned that I had to overcome was I had to overcome the illusion of space. I had to overcome the illusion of me and you. I had to overcome the illusion of this body and that I'm this body or in this body. Once I got free of that and could relate to myself and know myself as consciousness, which therefore was unbounded, then I could relate to you as consciousness is unbounded. And then I could go into that unbounded place where there's just consciousness, and anything that was in that place was knowable to any consciousness that was in that place then was unbounded, which meant me, which meant you, except I knew it and you didn't. So to me, that was the part I had really looked at as such a key thing, was the overcoming the illusion of space, the illusion of the boundaries. Because when we enter into the game of this world, into the 3D movie of this, we take on the illusion of the we are this. We get caught in this, and we live as if, and then we worry about it, and how it looks, and this, and how long is it going to live, and this. And but in my conversation, such as it was with Buddha, which was really just me, just mostly out of my body, but trying to tune in, but he actually talked about things that had much more to do with time. That, as he related it to me, what set him free more than anything else was overcoming the illusion of time. And I'm going to try and talk about it the way I got it. This is difficult, and I'm going to lay it out the way I kind of got it. And it might be for some of you may go, I don't get what the heck he's talking about. Other people go, well, that's interesting intellectually, but it doesn't mean anything. For some other people, it may be an aha. But for me, it was a kind of an aha, because it was a piece that I had been missing in my own understanding of the dynamic of how this works. So think Buddha as I related to Buddha. So I shouldn't say it was really Buddha, because maybe it was my imagination, but it sure seemed good. But what I really got here is he said, this is how I saw it. He said, the essence of the call power is it plays with fear. So down here, fear is the great underlying entrapper of us. Can everybody see it? Okay, good. You see it? So the underlying thing was fear. So fear, first and foremost, is the great entrapper. It seems like when we take on the form and the body, fear seems to come with it. Some of the fear we take on is the reflexive fear, the instinctive fear. And I don't think that's the one that really traps us. Now, it's interesting when you read about Buddha and talk about Buddha. When they talk about Buddha as a young man in the stories, they say, well, Buddha went out to find the cure, the solution for old age, sickness, and death. But the way Buddha was relating it to me was, he said what it really was about was these qualities of mind. And the first one he says is predictability. He talked about how in our consciousnesses we fall into the trap of predictability. So what is predictability really saying? Is when something happens or something happens repeatedly, we start living predictably. So we start living based upon the predictableness. Now what does that do? Well, it takes us out of the moment. Having predictability allows us to take our consciousness and our focus away from other things that of worrying about this. This is, well, that's predictable, so now I can focus on this. It allows us to utilize our focus more precisely. So that's a positive. But he related to me that this was a huge trap, that we get caught in predictability, which becomes the habitualness of our life. And so we lose the attentiveness to the presence of God, to the God in the moment, to the Holy Spirit as it moves, and to the ordinary joys in living. I mean, how many times do we say, read that poem, The End of Life, guy says, if I could do it all again, I'd eat more ice cream. I would. So he's really saying, I would smell the roses. I'd get back to the moment. There's so much going on, and I missed it. And so he really looked at the overcoming of this, of the predictability, that inside of him he had to penetrate through that part of his consciousness that would keep reaching for the predictable. And he had to go to the source of it and penetrate the source of it and stand behind the source of it, so there was no predictability. So everything was new for him. He fell into the moment. And then the next one, which old age, sickness. And he said, well, this was the hardest one for me to understand. And it's the one he gave me last. But I'll try and talk about it as I saw it. And the word, I couldn't get the right, there were so many words. But comparability with sicknesses is again, deals with time. That's why they call the time spirit, is that we're constantly measuring where we were to where we were. See, predictability is going, we're trying to measure the future. The whole thing about sickness, yes, we're afraid that sickness will lead to the finality of death. But in the comparability, we're measuring us against yesterday. Called, my back hurts. Yesterday didn't hurt. Because my back not hurting yesterday is a reference point that my back shouldn't hurt. So in this comparability process, so that we're constantly in our minds measuring one thing against, we're doing a comparison process. And so the penetration of this capacity of consciousness to be locked into comparisons and to continually weighing evidence of how does this compare to this, to this, to this. Because this, again, was another thing that takes us out of the moment. It takes us out of the present. And another thing it does is it invites us to lose track of the gratitude. Why? Because we're inevitably, with this kind of thing, there's going to be all those things that we'll end up focusing on that aren't the way they should be, or aren't the way they were. Okay? So this is the comparability piece. And the last thing he talked about was finality. And this is the illusion of finality. Because as he presented it to me when he awoke, and it broke through all this, he saw there was no finality, that there is no end. And when he fell into the eternalness of it, but the illusion of finality. Now, some of us goes, well, but I want it to be final. I go, so I wish it would end someday. Won't this end? We can't wait till 5 o'clock so we can leave work. TGIF, We're looking for finality, but the truth is that illusion of finality was just a big illusion that was trapping people, because the fear of dying, there's the death, but with it the loss of all the things that we attach to and treasure in life. So it became the fear of losing that loved one, that fear of losing that kitty cat, that fear of losing the position, the recognition of the people around us, that there would come a time when it would all be gone. And penetrating that illusion, you'd say, well, but that does happen. No, it really doesn't. It only appears to happen. See, because it's all built upon the whole you're in the movie. See, in the movie, people die, but when you wake up, you realize nobody died. It was just a movie. So these are the three things that worked within the human consciousness. And that became fear became the motivators why we have to do all these and have to work with inside of these. And so this is what he offered as a great understanding of part of what he did. And that it's funny, it's kind of like setting the record straight a little bit. I'll tell you a funny story. It's interesting. We went to India on our honeymoon, which was not the brightest thing we ever did. But we went to a place called Bodh Gaya in India, which is where the Bodhi tree is. And if you go there, there's about 15 or 20 temples there for every Buddhist sect in the world. They have their temple there, a temple there, and they're all there. And there's what they're calling where the Bodhi tree is. Now, do they know exactly? Well, what happened is the Emperor Asoka, about 300-400 years after the Buddha, got a transplant of the original Bodhi tree and planted it there. And supposedly it's right in the right spot. So is it the right spot or not? Who cares? They think it is. And but an interesting thing happened to me because I have a spiritual connection to the Buddha from my own past lives. And so when we came into Bodh Gaya, what was very interesting, we were driving into town and Buddha appeared to me. So we were there a couple days, and he was there for 2 days. He was my guide in Inner Worlds talking about all this. But anyway, the funny story is you go to this place where the Bodhi tree is, and this Buddhist group, they'd figured out the idea that if they could pray to the Buddha, like prostrate themselves before the Buddha at this tree that was honoring the Buddha like this was their way to enlightenment and salvation. And so they would do this, but they'd figured out that the more they did it, the faster they were going to get enlightenment. And so they had rigged this kind of board. They put this upon, and so they'd throw themselves forward, and there was something on the board with a strap, and it would snap them back. And so they would do this, and they could just do going boom, 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 and this was this. So anyway, I was watching this. We were sitting there watching this, and I started to laugh, which is not the thing you're supposed to do at the holiest place in the world for 1 billion people. But I couldn't help it. It was so funny. And I just wasn't really thinking. I just said to Buddha, what do you think about all this? And his answer was, not much. But part of what it's really saying is that in the Buddhist tradition, and like the teachings that Jesus brought, and probably if we went through Zoroaster or any other great masters that have come into the world and carried God consciousness and then been way showers to how we can get free, and that what they did and what they said has a way of getting turned and twisted and perverted into something different. And so in some ways I think he kind of liked sharing that with me, just so people get an idea that was really more the level he was playing at. He was playing at a much more sophisticated level than simply what's left out there of an eightfold path and a middle way, which were part of his teaching, but it wasn't getting to the depth of what he was talking about. He was talking about a deeper breaking free of the fundamental illusion, as the Hindus call it, the Maya, because he was in a Hindu world. He was in that world of India, breaking free of the Maya. And this is what he had to do, was break free within his own consciousness. And so he was a real role model of how we can do that. So he offered that, and I am offering it to you. First I thought, is that really to share with everybody? But I thought the fact that he shared it with me yesterday, I figured, why not? I've kind of come more to the point of view, instead of me deciding what people are ready for, I'll just let God decide. And I'll just share the things that I've been shown. And if it works for somebody, great. If it doesn't, Maybe someday it will. All right, feels like we should be done. So I think it's too early for a break, right?
There is no time. 2:24.
All right. I'm going to show you my one other thing I managed to write down. And this is going to be a lot to do when we talk and do sharing. And this is going to be a lot what I'm looking for when I work with you. And this is the way I put it. Okay? Out of mind versus it's not mine. Okay? This is what I want. This is what I'm looking for. This is what a lot of people are doing. They think they're clearing things because they do a process, they get real emotional, they cry about it. It's better. Well, it's cleared. Well, it is because it's out of your mind. But karma is held to us more than anything else, particularly the kind of karma we can clear through working and through processing, through identification. Because we identify it as ours, it's ours. We're the one that makes it ours, not God or anything else. It's the lock. We lock it in. So, as we journey and work karma, this is going to be an essential thing. We're going to get more to this. It's not mine. So many times I work with people, and it's probably the least enjoyable thing I have to do with people because so many people call, and they've quote picked up something. You know, I'm affected by, maybe it's something from another person, or they've picked up an entity or a demon, or I don't really care what it is. And they hear me look at it and says, oh, well, you picked this up because you're being over-responsible. You're being over-responsible. And then I may say, because in a past life you were the teacher. And what am I doing? Am I taking them into the past life? No, I'm extricating them from the past life. See, in the unconscious, there's no time as we know it. So therefore, if in another life they swore, I'll take you to God, 1,000 years can pass, but in the unconscious, they're still doing that. That creates an opening. And that opening in the unconscious allows things to come to them. So what am I really changing? They're not even aware of it. It's still out of their mind. All they know is they feel terrible, that they're angry, that they're pissed off, that they want to kill themselves, or whatever it is. Yet what's really going on is something's been attracted to them or found a way to them that isn't for them, and it's found its way to them because of an old identification. So I'll say, you're not their teacher, just let it go. Now, when I first learned to do that, I'd look into more depth about why this is important. Maybe they made vows, maybe they swore something. I might have to go into more depth. For me, doing with people, that isn't required, because as soon as I'm looking at it, for some reason, that interface with their consciousness, it just starts letting go. It is something, so for somebody else, they may need to get more detail. I don't care about detail, I care about the change. And the change I want is not the out of mind, I want the break of the identification. At some point, especially people I've worked with over a number of years, something in them will start to get on this it's not mine thing. It'll just start to resonate within their being, and they'll stop picking stuff up like they once did. It's a strange paradox. They go, I facilitated the class, and there's all these people, but I tied into one person's hurt feelings. Oh, I know who that was. Yeah, their mother was dying, and they come out and they go, that was pretty good. Dealt with all those people, because the it's not mine level starts to realize. What is this really saying? The ultimate it's not mine is when you really give it all to God. So what you're really just saying is all those lives you lived, they're not yours. They're God's. You give them all to God. It's all God's. So if it's not mine, it's all God's, then God's responsible. Does it work? It works totally as an act of awareness and consciousness. It doesn't work as a semantic thing. Another thing to understand is that inside of us, we all don't want to have to deal with that karma we would call our bad karma. which is those things we've done before that are bringing things back to us that are going to kick our behinds. We all go, I don't want that. So, and yet there's things we did in other times in this life, but in other lives too, which were, we were really upstanding and we were really generous and we were good and we were compassionate and we did service. And so that's bringing action back to us and we go, yeah, I'm looking forward to that coming back. That's going to be nice. Problem with that is, as long as you're playing the good karma, bad karma game, you're still playing under the negative power more. We want to go beyond good karma, bad karma to the no karma game. And so what that really means, it says if you're going to give it up to God, you give it all to God. You give all your good works, all your bad works. Because in God, there's no good or bad works. It's just all the same. It's just your works. It's just all that took place. It's all that happened during the movie. But if you can come to that, you can bypass so much of the things that are kind of the burden of living. The burden of dealing with other people, the burden of working with people sometimes, where it just seems like there's such a propensity to be affected. Yeah, I was feeling so good, and I had lunch with that person. Now I feel so tired. I feel so drained. What happened? Well, even though in your mind they're sitting over there and I'm sitting over here, and my body, we didn't really touch. Maybe say hi. Maybe we didn't hug. But on the level of consciousness, those bodies are not a barrier at all. On the level of consciousness, we interplayed. And in that interplaying, unconsciously, I felt I was responsible. And that's the predominant reason people pick this stuff up. There are other things that happen too. It's possible you could pick somebody up because instead of being over-responsible, you're over-responsive. But this is less common. What does that mean? Well, maybe they were your priest in another lifetime. Maybe they were your teacher. Maybe they were your father. And it's possible you had them on a pedestal and looked so up to them that they could do no wrong, so that when you're around them, you unconsciously open up to receive whatever they're carrying. That can happen too, but that is much rarer. And therefore, it's a very secondary thing. I mention it because it's the other main reason people pick stuff up. And the other thing, now that I'm down this track, I might as well say it, the other main reason you can pick something up of, let's say, the non-physical reality type stuff that is there, isn't talked too much about, whether it's demons, ghosts, or other more exotic forms of negativity. You may have karma with it. It may have encountered you before, and you didn't come out of the encounter clean. You mean that it beat you? Maybe. Maybe you cursed it. Now it can come at you because you put negativity towards it. Maybe it dominated you and you worshipped it. It can definitely come at you. So that's the third element. But the most key thing is to get into the it's not mine. If we can do that, we're going to deal with a lot less junk, a lot less of the negative things that seem to be a constant infringement on the highness that our days and our lives should have. I mean, we know we're getting more connected to the Spirit, we're getting closer, we know we have these high moments, but we keep falling into this junked up place. More than anything else, it's this underlying sense of identification. Now, changing identification is a tricky thing. Doing it circumstance by circumstance is a long, slow way to do. That's why as we reach for soul transcendence, as we reach for awakening, as we reach for enlightenment, a byproduct of that we hope will be this release of identification. So that's one reason it pays to meditate. Our spiritual exercise, whatever we call it, is to wake up to who we are beyond the flesh. And in a sense, to identify ourselves with that which we are beyond the flesh. Eventually, though, we even give that up. And we're just identified with that is everything, which is God. So, with that, I guess we will take some questions.
It's really good to be here. And I actually just want to start out by saying how much I love you, Michael. My heart is so full of love for you and what you step forward to do. And I just want to convey that to you. And what's present for me to share is I just notice like a pattern of self-punishment, and it's something that's been...
Spirit's already talking, so let's go.
Okay, so I'm going to be
it said
quiet.
your adversary and your enemy more than anything else is pride. The pride goeth before the fall. You were a teacher of the law in another lifetime. And this would be under the Luciferian plan that we talked about before. And so, as a teacher of that, you deal a lot in absolutes. And so what happens inside when we do that, and many of us have done things like that in different lifetimes, we get locked in. It creates an underlying inflexibility in our demeanor and our consciousness. And the Spirit's moving you pretty good, so just...
I felt a little silly.
Yeah, it's okay. Anybody around her, if she gets wobbly, just make sure she doesn't fall, okay? Because the Holy Spirit's touched her, so she's going to be going through some stuff. Yeah, that's
I
okay.
think there's a part of me that doesn't want to hear it, so I'm just calling myself
Yeah,
present to it.
That's fine.
All right.
Now, see, here's an interesting thing. The angel Gabriel stepped in with her. Now, when he works with me, in this, that's because the negative power, not the call power, but the Luciferian powers tried to come in and interfere, because what we're dealing with here is a way where her consciousness has still been under the Luciferian plan. Part of her is still caught in this old teacher identification. And so when she comes into positions of power or authority, she reverts. Not because she tries to, because it literally grabs her in the subconscious, unconscious mind and pushes her to try and go back to that way of dealing with things. So the negative power, when we started to move on this karma, tried to come in and reinforce the pattern to stop it. But from the spirit world, Gabriel came in and stopped it. There you go. So this is where you hear about spiritual war going on, battle, light, and darkness. It's going on right now with her. So the one they call Beelzebub came in, and Gabriel caught him, was pushing him back. Just got to let that go. There you go. All right, so Jesus just came in. We got the heavy hitters in now. That's it. There you go. Now, this happened about 13,000 years ago. But in that time, because as a teacher of law, you spoke against the work of a spiritual master in that time who was in the alignment of the traveler consciousness, which you now support. So that's created a sense of undeservedness, and that's where we get back to your thing about being hard on yourself and self-punishing. Like, I get to be part of this, but I don't deserve to be part of this. Yeah, and I can't do enough good work for this because somehow I don't even belong here because of this. But see how the law tries to lock you in, the karma. See, this is where the Luciferian thing would do the retention, trying to hold you to punishing you. And that's why that plan doesn't work, because a person keeps going through it and then keeps punishing themselves for going through it. And so it's so hard to get past karma. But we come with the Lord and He brings forgiveness. But it's you who have to bring the forgiveness now. To recognize that was done in ignorance. When Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do," He was speaking about us every day. We've all been caught in this whirlwind. There you go. Just let it go.
I just feel like it just comes at me every day.
Well,
I face it so much.
Well, it's time to let it go. Time to recognize that it's unnecessary. You can shift that karma right now.
I choose that.
Well, it's being shifted while we're
Okay,
talking.
good.
Now, the habitualness of what your mind may want to do, remember, predictability?
Yeah.
See, we can push it out But the call side of it will want to run but that's what I always think about. So I got to go, no, I got to change my habitual way of thinking. If my thing is to do the predictability of thinking about those things I always think about, and doing the comparability, the comparison thing where I'm going to go, but look how I am and how I should be. If I'm going to run that idealism of doing that, then I'm going to just hold myself in, even if the karma's changed.
I don't want to do that.
Then don't.
Okay.
This is where you take dominion and choose the gratitude, and choose. This is where affirmations are so useful, and positive statements, and those reinforcements that we all know we use. That's what Insight was so great for. Remember the Insight, for those who've done it, and that Insight 2 affirmation that changed people's lives? Because it was a charged statement of, this is who I am, a positive being. But I don't think many people had affirmations that say, well, I judge myself in the morning, but not at night. It's I'm a child of love and light. It's something beautiful. So this would be something well worth it for you to probably either create affirmations that really work for you, or maybe get like the forgiveness meditation, I think it's called, one of those old JR tapes. It's an interphasing, and it gives all those forgiveness affirmations. That would be a real useful one for you.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Somebody mentioned the Living in Grace packets too. There's a lot of, but those charge statements where you just positive this, and that'll that'll help to counteract the familiarity of mentally bludgeoning yourself.
Yeah.
Karmically, that's better. That's been erased. But, you're not the only one doing this. If I asked for a raise of hand, we'd all be up. I'm sure at some point, sometime, when we're hard on ourselves, it's just, the mind seems to want to do that. So. One thing they're saying is that you're talking to yourself. It's not too much, it's not the way I was saying. You're talking to yourself. And one of the voices talking to you is not a voice of the Spirit, not your own. But you're confused because it's an agent of negativity that's playing with you, and it plays in this part of your body around here. It's trying to make you think it's the basic self, but it's not.
Yeah. I do actually
It's
speak.
lying to you.
Oh. Oh, wow. Okay.
Promotes fearfulness in you. It keeps pushing you to the idea to trying to get it right. And I got to do it just right. Part of me goes, good luck.
Yeah. Sort of fits in with the self-punishment thing.
Yeah, because then you get to punish yourself when it's not right. Well, if I have to do it just right, or I'll get punished, I better do it just right. But you got to let that go, because it's hitting you right in the gut as an unnecessary experience for you.
But sometimes I'll be in the joy of doing something, and then I feel that come in, and it's like it
Takes you right out of it.
takes me out of it.
So recognize this as an imposter.
Okay.
So we're just asking the Spirit in there to help you evacuate that.
To evacuate that.
Challenge you in 2 other lifetimes, and each time it succeeded in getting you into a self-deprecating consciousness and caused you to default on the greater opportunities of that life.
Well, I choose my intention as joy. I choose the joy and compassion.
Well, choose it regardless of what you hear inside.
Okay.
This is funny. My nose doesn't run. Start doing this, it starts running.
Yeah, it's funny. I have a bumper sticker that says you don't have to believe everything you think.
Oh boy, isn't that perfect?
That's a really good
That's
one.
a great one for you.
I guess I do speak to myself a lot, and part of the reason that I do that is a way to, just give myself loving and give.
Well, that's the proper way of speaking to yourself. But I think you've got somebody in there who's not been following the program.
Okay.
Take a breath. It's gone now. I love you. I think that's it. Light's picking up off you.
Love you too. So one more question of whether when Parley died, I just I experienced a lot of grief.
You
and
took it the wrong way.
Okay.
Yeah, he's in a nice place.
Okay.
Actually, am I supposed to give something to him about that? I'll do it now, and you can write it down. You can tell him. They wanted me to look in on where he is. It's hard to describe. Parley was a horse who got injured and died. A baby horse who died recently
His quality was soul.
up at Windermere Ranch. So he, I can tell you what it looks like looking through his consciousness, but it just looks like sunshine. I guess it's all kind of a horse paradise. It smells like alfalfa. There's the water running, like just water everywhere. It's not a lake, but it's just water like running, and there's sound of birds. He's happy.
Thank you.
He'll be back.
Thank you, Michael. God bless you. I love you.
About 5 years, he should be back.
5 years. Okay.
And that could change, because I could say that, and tomorrow he's coming back. But so far, that's what it looks like.
Oh, I love you, Parley. I really love you.
If you can, when that's going on, go to the place where you're one. Go to the place where you're one when, Jesus said, there is no death. And then he proved it by resurrecting his body to show that who we are outlives the flesh. You could connect with him. That's all I did. But you're still thinking, he's there and I'm here, and his body and my body. But I'm not doing that. I'm just going to him. Do the same thing.
Okay.
That's the transcendence. That's soul transcendence. You're transcending
Got
the
it.
illusion of the flesh. Okay.
Thank you.
So I guess we could take some more questions. I haven't got anything else prepared. But we'll see where it goes. So
The only word I have is...
you're being affected by extraterrestrial stuff. Never saw that before with you, but it's there right now. Used to play with that stuff in another life, and we're sounds like a science fiction movie. You are given great powers. In alignment with a extraterrestrial source, and it does sound like a script of a B movie. But it created alignment and an openness in you that, and a receptivity, and so that in a sense you've been plugged back into by something that I'm going to say it like it messes with you, like messes with your brain waves and your alpha waves and stuff I don't understand. I'm not a scientist in your thought process. And
Neither am I.
you ever get the feeling like you're somewhere else while you're here?
I would say 24/7.
Okay. Because they were doing something with bilocation and some kind of experimentation around all that. And I think they've been playing with you with that. So you swore some kind of oath of undying loyalty, et cetera, that you might want to let go of. See, this is another bad thing about no time. You can bind yourself to something because you're so sure it's the cat's meow. And so you bind yourself to it and you say, I swear to God and before the blood of Jesus, and whatever your oath is, if inside of you it's held as this is really a strong intention, it stays. And it creates an opening in the consciousness for other things to come into you, even though you're long gone from that. So, just got to let that go and forgive any judgment of some of the things you did with the power you got in that life. You just really fell in love with the prestige that came to you in that lifetime for being so capable and so gifted. It was like having, to the people around you, it was like you had spiritual powers, but you really didn't. You just had, amplified powers of consciousness. So, and there's a difference between the two. Why? Because an amplified power of consciousness is amplifying the attributes of our humanness, and amplifying the attributes of our psychic nature. But the power of spirit is something beyond all that. It is no respecter of persons, so it doesn't care about our humanness. That's why it's so paradoxical that the more you go into spirit, the more what you do in this world doesn't matter. And that's yet part of the trick of the negative power. It says, well, if you're so spiritual, then you would act like this, and you would never have these thoughts, and you would be immune to these temptations, and you would be flawless. And so because we buy into that, we seek to be flawless. And then we equate flawlessness with divinity, with higher consciousness. But it's not really so. We are already spiritual. We're already God. We're already divine. So you wake up to that, you could still have the same personality, same basic self, same ego. Now hopefully if you really wake up to who you are spiritually, you won't be run in the same way by all those things. But at times you could be. Because we are creatures of habit, and the habitualness will sometimes run on us just because it does. So part of the learning for you is give up the pursuit of perfection, and give up the pursuit of power, and give up the pursuit of greatness. One of my favorite quotes about Jesus was, somebody called him good master, and he said, why call me good? He said, only God is good. So I figure, if Jesus could say that, then who am I, or who are any of us to parade ourselves as anything other than, just another. He used to call himself the Son of Man. I think to highlight just the ordinariness. But that God takes us as that and loves us as that and transforms us in that. And lifts us and heals us in that. So that's been a kind of your karmic road through a lot of lifetimes. And I'm just waiting till the extraterrestrial thing gets wiped out for you. Sometimes this is where I'm kind of vamping. I'm kind of just talking because Spirit's still working him over. It's done. It was about 36 lifetimes ago that was done to you, so it's been a while. Now, you might have had a question.
It's not so much a question as looking for an explanation.
Just got one. That's part of your problem.
Ah.
You're looking for an explanation. When I was a very young man, I fell asleep one day and went out of my body, and I met with the master who was sitting next to me on It looked like bleachers, like a playground. I was probably about 18, 19, or 20. I had this conversation with this guy, and I woke up, and I remember wrote something down. And later when I met JR, I realized it was him. It was before I'd met him physically. But I remember writing down, asking not to answer all, so can be tasted the sweet fullness of existence. See, the understanding that you think will give you the answers so that you can be free and you can be happy and you can be healthy and you can be beyond the things that trouble you is part of the illusion that keeps you caught. Because the place in you that's clamoring for that understanding will inevitably find something else it needs to understand. Something else to figure out. It's a conceptual confinement. It's within yourself, there's a mindset or a model of yourself as a consciousness that requires understanding to find completeness, to find God, to find peace and happiness and holiness and loving. But it's not true. It just is not true. Understanding comes after the fact. Know God, you'll understand. When you know God, you won't care about understanding. But you will. Outlast this. That's my advice. The advice I'm hearing for you. Outlast this. You've been clearing a lot of karma from another time and place. And so a lot of your work is in other levels. And it's really hard for your ego because your ego, that's kind of interesting how they set that up for you. They set it up called, because of your karma, you came in with this high sense of yourself and high ambition to contribute and make a difference and, leave your mark. But you also got all this karma to work on other levels. So when people have that very frequently, their lives sort of, I was going to say degenerate, but it's not the very good word. They kind of end up they're kind of, what are you doing? I don't know. Not much. When they say life is as easy as breathing in and breathing out, you kind of go, yeah, it's mostly what I'm doing. Because you kind of you feel like I'm on the sidelines. You're saying, put me in, coach. It's called, no, your work is on the sidelines. And the funniest thing about the Spirit is whatever it is we're ambitious for is usually the opposite of what we get. So you get somebody like me who's very comfortable in the supportive role. And then they put me up here. But like my wife said, some of the things I'm doing, John Roger was talking to me about 10 years ago. And I'm finally okay. So we just have to find a way to get into the gratitude and recognize the perfection of it. That's the funniest thing. It's just so perfect where you are. There's a thing that USM puts out, which to me is the most useful single statement of all the stuff I've ever, and I use a lot of the USM stuff because I went through USM and it's one of the most valuable things I have in understanding consciousness. But that statement of how you relate to the issue is the issue. It's like, oh my God, there it is. See, that's Christ's Lucifer. How you relate to the issue is the issue. Lucifer says relate to it like this. Christ says relate to it like this. So which are we going to do? So how are you going to relate to the way your life is? Are you going to be trapped under the call power by, again, doing that comparison? I called it comparability because that was the closest word I had to it. Where you just keep going, yeah, my life's like this, but it should be like this. I remember before when it was like this. And so then are you going to assail yourself through that? See, that's the thing. See, a demon or some of these negative force type things, they may assault you more directly, but mostly what happens is they encourage you to assault yourself. That's really what they do. And the call power invites you into that. By any other name, it's still the tempter that takes us away from where we really could be living. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. If you're not experiencing it, you're not knowing it. You've chosen a different reality to involve yourself in. Some point, everyone wakes up to that truth. Everyone. It's the guaranteed, that's the not one soul be lost that John Roger talks about. It's guaranteed. You've been given this chance to finish a lot of karma. You're one of those souls. It's funny, I'm back looking at it before you incarnated with the karmic board, and they're kind of going, well, you could probably do this in 2, maybe 3. And you're such a go-getter. I want to do it in 1. And then I can just hear them saying, okay, well, this is how you have to do it. But they said it'll be very difficult for you because your ambitiousness will continue to rail against the level of involvement, the level of participation that in the material physical world that will inevitably come about through this choice. Because you feel shortchanged by life, like you're missing it. It's going by and you're not on the train. But all along it'll just be, no, it's just you're on a bigger train. And you said yes, because in the spirit, we do those things. We don't think about how much it's going to hurt and how hard it's going to be. We think, I want to get to where I want to get to. I want to see the face of God. I want to wake up, become conscious again of who I really am. And so that's the track you chose, and I applaud you for that. It's funny that I have to applaud myself for similar kind of choices too, but I recognize inside you how hard it is because I know when I was in those places how much I was going, oh, why did I do this? But it doesn't last. It's not going to go on forever. Here's where there is a finality. But if you wake up, you realize it doesn't matter if this goes on forever, because you wake up to the other reality. So you don't have to seek for finality or resist finality. You realize all that ever is always was and always is. That's the kingdom of heaven. And that's what your path is really about. For you, it's like there was a movie called A Beautiful Mind. And this guy, I think he was schizophrenic, but he was a brilliant guy. And so he came to this inner peace inside of himself where he learned to just have that other reality that was the schizophrenia go on. And then he would just stay on task to the things of what he really mattered to him. He claimed the power of intention. His intention to go do those things that his heart called him to, regardless of this other thing. That's the way you want to do it. And learn to relate to all this other thing that, quote, gives you a bad time. It's just like that. It's like, what's the old thing? Yeah, talk to the hand. Meanwhile, you're on about your Father's business. And for you, it's waking up. That's first and foremost. That's what I have for you.
Could I ask a question? No.
The light lifted, so
Okay,
you can
thank
ask
you.
it, but...
No, thank you.
Yeah. But just as you stood up there, an angel came in and a demon came in, so... That's interesting. I'm talking a lot more about angels, and people kind of wonder about that. They're coming more forward to be talked about. And I meditate a lot about this. I say, well, we got masters, we got Christ, we got the Ascended Masters, the Great White Brotherhood, we got a lot of guys, and the master line of the travelers, so do we need to deal with the angels more? And there was an interesting answer they gave me. Well, they said, well, right now, the biggest adversary you have in the work you're doing, and the planet has and going to where it needs to go, is coming from Lucifer and those that fell for him. And guess what those guys are? Angels. So he says, you better understand how angels work, and better understand, that the best guys who know how to deal with them are the other angels. So that changed something for me and made me realize, okay, I'll work with whatever works. But I'm also telling people more about that to realize that we have that support. And these angelic forces are working very much with us. And they are the greatest arm of the Christ's work. So I'm going to talk more about it and help people become more conscious about it. And there's going to be more things that are going to be done in the future to help people become more aware of that reality. And so go ahead.
Hi. When you were talking about Buddha and dealing with the call of power and time, the three things that you mentioned up there seem to be really shifting for me. And I don't know if you have anything on that you can talk about. Time is starting to become more unreal to me. And anyway. My life definitely has not been predictable over the last few years. Me comparing myself to what I thought I should do and where I am has certainly morphed and melted. And those two things really kind of stand out. So.
Okay.
And the fear has gotten less.
That's good. That's a sign of triumph. The demon that's with you is talking to you about ambition.
Is it what I label success in the world?
Yeah.
Got it.
It's telling you need to do it for the responsibilities of life. So it's coercing your consciousness to look at the need for this success is based upon outer things and other people.
Right.
Like you're going to do it. So I need to do this for other people, for my children, or for to pay back debts,
Debts, right.
To have things in the world I want. But it's pushing you to a shallower way of seeing your life and your purpose. And the angels there are encouraging you to look deeper. Look beyond all that. See, here's where it gets so paradoxical. Mm-hmm. In the spirit, this is not going on. See, in the spirit, you're already God, you're already divine, there's nothing missing. So, if you listen to that demon, you automatically have to view yourself and view your life as being in lack, and then you have to go on a quest to fulfill that lack, and that's the process that inevitably will follow from that choice. But see, that's an entrapment for you, and it's like the version of the guy, I'll work and work and work, and then I'll retire, and then it'll be great. And we know how that works out for so many people. Be in the joy now. That's the counsel of the Spirit. These things will pass. This will work itself through. See, you're more riding on a river than making the boat go up the river. But this thing keeps pushing you that you have to. And I've always loved the old adage which says, work like it's all up to you and pray like it's all up to God.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
So do your part, but then relax. This whole time is a strengthening of trust in you.
Absolutely.
You've been remiss in that area over a number of lifetimes, about 6 lifetimes here. And, well, this is the 7th, so it goes back to you and a guy named Jesus.
Chewy. Yeah, I remember him.
Yeah. So he just said, will you come into this like you did before? Or will you accept the grace and the guidance and recognize and realize that I'm always with you?
Mm.
And that our time together will never end. For we exist out of time. We are one forever in the love of the Father. I guess he told you that before and you didn't buy it, so. Here we are again.
Mm.
Groundhog Day.
It's actually not a bad Groundhog Day today.
You're just complicating it more than it needs to be. It's just next, next, next. It's interesting because in that ambitiousness that the demon pushes you to, there's a kind of a secretiveness that gets amplified. You really had a lot of lifetimes where you dealt with these mystery schools and they had all these secret codes and passwords and like who can have the hidden knowledge and you know, the magic word and that whole mindset of that it wasn't for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You still have what is that, a Templar standard in your aura?
Yeah, I've got the ring on that you're blessed a while back.
Let's still carry that. Yeah. So it's not all this. It's not that complicated. You're just making it more complicated than it needs to be. Just said be honest more than you are. Start with yourself and then with other people.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Be honest more than you have been. Start with yourself and then other people. It's almost like all those lives of secretiveness made you over-calculating. It's an interesting thing. This is a nice segue because this is something I was thinking about. So in our minds, in our way we process information, there's basically 2 processes that we deal with, like if we're having a conversation normally. And that would be, we deal with calculation, which is figuring out what we're going to say. And then we have another thing where we speak spontaneously. And so at certain times when we're really relaxed, we're hanging out with a friend, we're just being spontaneous. Then somewhere over here, it's called Mr. Policeman. I'm very calculating what I say. I don't want the ticket. So
How'd you know that just happened?
Yeah. The shadow knows. So the calculation, the spontaneous is like a dance that goes on inside our consciousness. And what happens to different ones of us is that some of us, we get caught into too much calculation. And actually some of us get caught into too much spontaneity. Or we go, he just doesn't think. Yeah. So this is a dance that goes on in different people. And the thing is, there are times when it'd be better to be more calculating and times it's better to be more just say what's on your mind. But in these other lives, you learn calculation. And so it kind of got ingrained in you. And so you're over-calculating. Because you don't want to say the wrong thing. You don't want to divulge the secret. You don't want to give away the knowledge that is reserved for those that are ready for it. Now, it's an interesting corollary to that, something I've talked to some people about that I've worked with over time, is that we deal with tolerances, which are close tolerant and wide tolerant. So, for example, we'll do it. We'll just do this as a demonstration. So, close tolerance is when we see details and we notice every little thing. So, we're all capable of both. Some of us live in close tolerance all the time, and some of us are much more wide tolerant naturally. So for example, but what we want to learn, it's valuable to us to learn to have control over these processes inside of ourselves. So for example, if we wanted to be close tolerant, we'll do a little exercise here. We're going to each shift into close tolerant mode and see how it is. And some of us will go, feels like nothing happened. That's because you're already there. Other people go, ew. So here's what we do. We just take our hands, just like that. See, like peekaboo. See, we're all looking right through here. And then what we're going to do, you don't do it now, but you're going to see what I'm going to do gradually is I'm going to fold my hands very, very slowly. And as I do, I'm going to keep looking ahead, but you don't have to do it yet. And I'm just doing it really fast, okay, like that, just like that. So just keep looking ahead and just very gradually keep looking ahead. Now the hands are going to start to fold in like doors folding over eyes, but they're going to go very, very slowly. Very, very slowly. So very, very slowly, slowly, slowly. Keep looking ahead, looking ahead, looking ahead, looking ahead, looking ahead, looking ahead. You take your hands away. Now who feels different? Yeah. So you shifted. You were in a more wide tolerant place, and you got shifted into a close tolerant place, and you're kind of like blinking. It's disorienting. Now the close tolerant place is naturally more calculating. Close tolerant place is naturally more calculating, or it's more analyzing, figuring it out. The wide tolerant place is naturally going to be more spontaneous and more off the cuff, like saying what comes to itself. So to get to the wide tolerant place, we go the other way. So we're going to take our hands like prayer position. We're going to rest our thumbs right on the bridge of our nose, just like this. And then we're just going to gradually, the hands are going to go the other way very slowly, just like before. And they're going to show everybody so you can see they're going to be going like this, but they're going to be going very slowly. So we're just going to start and gradually just going to unfold those hands and allow them to keep looking around your hands, the left eye around the left hand, the right hand around the right hand, the right eye around the right hand. Keep looking around those hands, around the hands, around the hand. And there you go. Take your hands away. Ah, who feels different from that? Yeah. See, because now you're in a wide tolerant mode. You kind of go, yeah, my vision wants to take in the room. So, now there's times we want to be close tolerant. Oh my God, I have to do my taxes, close tolerant. Oh my God, my mother-in-law, wide tolerant. So there's some practical uses to that. More wide tolerant. Get away from the calculation, because that's almost is too intrinsic for you, and so it's thrown you out of balance. And the demon tries to tell you need that so that you stay one-dimensional. It's interesting that demon has been on your family line for a number of generations. Comes down. You have a crest for your family line?
We looked it up in Wales, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Came in about 4 generations back. It's been cleared. So, relax.
Yeah. Yeah. So I still continue what I'm doing, but just how I deal with the issue is the issue. Do it with more joy and...
Yeah, I mean, what you do is what you do. Continue, change, or whatever, but do it from that consciousness.
Got it.
Your karma is still your karma. You're still, go out and get into the car you drove up in to go to the place you came from, wearing the clothes you came. So all of that reality stays the same. How you deal with it is where we change it. So you get more in cooperation with the way it can work better for you. which is relax. Be more open around it.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah, they're still talking about that secretiveness.
Does it have to do with the Templar thing? Anything more with that?
Yeah, but there's a conceit with it too. It's like without realizing, though it was done in the guise of protecting higher spiritual truths and supporting higher spiritual truths, there's a negativity in it. It's a kind of a sanctimonious consciousness that came with those people, that they were the guardians and God's appointed us the guardians. And how do we know? Well, because we decided.
Is there anything having to do with the Rosalind Chapel that just started to...
Yeah, there's something for you there. Some oath you swore there. Well, I don't know how many years ago, 500 years ago, something like a long time ago. So you can get, let's let that go right now. You're going to feel the emotion now. The Spirit touched you. It's the funniest thing, that Spirit comes and touches somebody and it's just like, I've had guys that probably haven't cried in 40 years and that thing touches them and it's like, good luck. Come on, let it go. Come on, let it go.
It's in my legs. I can feel
Gotta let it go. There's a memory of dying on a battlefield with Hannibal, the Carthaginian general. Gotta let that go. It's coming up again. There you go. See, here I'm having to pick up a few other karmas to help him really let this go, because there's 3 other lives that have jumped in on this. I'm going to say some things that won't make any sense, don't need to, but I'm going to help him let it go. So we're just going to release you from the Atlantean Sarmata. Okay, just let it go. See, even his mind doesn't have to understand it. His inner body understands it, because you feel him just, because it. Now, do I know all this? No, the Spirit's telling me the words to tell him to release the karma. I can see the life, but the amazing thing about life is if you read a whole life and the person lived 80 years, it would take you 80 years to read the whole life. That's the big disadvantage of clairvoyancy. You have the ability to look in, but you don't know, you don't have a higher power guiding your look in, so you're always going to look in according to your agendas. And you'll see what you think is important, or what you've decided is important for that person. And there you may very well misconstrue what would be valuable. You may actually give them, they may come away from your information, which was totally correct, with the exact wrong approach to it. Because what was presented the way it was presented.
Was he around with that Atlantean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was your brother there. The other one I'm going to have to tie to you goes to another planet. This is in the Alpha Centauri system. It's kind of a warrior race. Oh, this is where the translation fails me, but you're the high, Ugmug, whatever. You're in power there. You took an oath of battle to fight for the cause of God and justice through time and eternity. And
sounded good at the
Yeah.
time.
well, you were a leader of those people, and oh, that's why we're back there, because the oath was given to the Luciferian power.
Oh, wow.
That's why it has to be undone. Take a breath. There it goes. Now you notice karma, these big breaths all over the place, because the Spirit's working all sorts of people with similar these kind of deals, because we've all done variations of these all kind of, it seemed like a good idea at the time.
Sounded great.
Yeah. I think that's it. Demons, sure. Demons are fallen angels. That's where they came from. And they're angels that have fallen into a particular state of I'm going to ask my friend who's most aware angelic person that I know. Would you say that a demon is in disinvolvement or disinvolvement? Okay. They're you're going to need a microphone. No. You can say it because other people can hear it.
Well, it's just that they've disinvolved themselves from the remembrance of the Lord and the surrender to the Spirit.
The other thing they're saying to me about them is they're caught in a time warp, which is interesting that then when they came into all this, they come into the dimension of time and space in a different way than they deal with in the world that they normally operate within. And it's almost like, I'll give you the image of it, and you can chime in if you think this is not right. Because see, I'm using a resource here because I have somebody who's very conscious of this more than me in mind, but the Spirit's conscious of it, but she can check me on it because I got it, I might as well use it. If you think about, they talk about 25 years after World War II ends, some guy comes out of the jungle on one of those islands in Japan. He's still fighting the war. In a sense, that's the demons. They're still caught in a misunderstanding of what's going on. So they're extremely uninformed, and the one that they gave allegiance to is not in any hurry to inform them. So part of the good news in all this is every time they move at us in the light, and we clear them the way we clear them here, or clear them in light, is they get taken in and they get shown what's really going on. And so they get freed, or they don't, because they still have the choice to get back, but they get shown. It's like, here's the truth. You don't want to believe it? Okay. But a lot of them turn, and it sets them free.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
A way to have compassion, or especially to not be afraid of a demon or a negative angel, because you'll sense them, and like Michael said, they can be very subtle. Those are the more powerful ones are very subtle. The ones that are not quite so powerful are, obvious. But a way to have compassion or to bring in a lack of fear is that when they fell with Lucifer, you could think of it as like Lucifer being a general and they were just the good soldiers. And so when Lucifer fell, so an angel's job, to oversimplify it, is to be surrendered to the Lord, to carry out the Lord's plan, the Lord's will, the Lord's work. So the angels, those angels that fell, actually had gotten to a point where they had become aware of otherness, or towards approaching co-creatorship, which is what we are born into. We are born, very dense, not remembering the Lord, but with a co-creatorship. They are born in an absolute state of surrender. So when Lucifer, in a sense, said, this is the plan, they went, yes, General, this is what we were born to, this is who we are, we're surrendered. But there was actually another choice, a very subtle discernment but what's the Lord's way? Not what's my Lord, Lucifer, what's the Lord, the allness, what is that way? So when you come to that choice point inside of yourself, it's the still small voice. It says, this is the highest path. So the demons really were, like Michael said, they were misinformed. They thought they were just following orders. Now, there was a voice inside of them that was higher that they discounted for all the temptations and all the reasons that we all fall. But they're really not all that different than us, and not that scary when you can relate to it in that way.
Thank you. Did that help?
Kind of looking at a fork here. I have a question, and then there's all this kind of letting go in the room right now, and not real oriented myself. So whenever you catch it. I'm
Well, there's
ready.
an angel of. It's strange because it's an angel of fear, but that's not what they mean. So let me look at it a little more. It'd be more like an angel of awe, the awe that comes between. If you go into this high spirit and you come before the Lord, there's the awe of God. And the high worlds of the spirit, as you move towards God, in a sense, there's a place where God reveals itself over and over again, and the great angels, they circle it in ecstasy because God shows another face of itself. But you got one of them with you, so you're doing something right. So what he's saying is you become afraid of your own transformation. And so that you're getting an unconscious pushback from within yourself, pushing back against the disillusion of your I-ness, the disillusion of your separate identity. You're being challenged by the good news of waking up. Like there's an awakening going on and you're getting pushed back. Now, is this going to happen for probably everybody? I would think so. I can't say it will for everybody because I'm not everybody in that sense. But it's certainly been my journey to wake up and go, oh, this is great, and I get that pushback. But inside you, there's a big pushback. Now, one of the ways it will push back on you particularly is it will try and get you to go down a mental track of focusing on minutia, where you're just kind of just like your mind keeps running to every little thing.
I can relate to that.
Yeah. So you'd be one of these wide tolerant people in that sense. Meaning, not that you need to do that, but that in a sense, you want to keep getting that bigger perspective.
That's my directions to open the tolerance.
Yeah. You're going to tend to be close tolerant. You probably know that about yourself. And people that know you probably go, yeah. But that will help you to get past more of what this is, because what it's doing is it's trying to amplify in you the character traits that are, they're native to you, but they're traits that you have viewed and thought of as essential to make your way in life. And genetically, they were seen as essential through a long line of genetics. And so because genetically it was deemed essential, it was reinforced culturally and almost an indoctrinated thing for you. And so it's really bred in you that you need to pay attention to these things. So the truth is you're going to wake up anyway. God wins this game. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. You will come awake, but it'd be easier and faster for you if you do more things to help get away from this thing that keep wanting to push you down to the small picture.
Like self-forgiveness,
all that.
gratitude.
Gratitude, absolutely. Gratitude always takes us to the big picture. Even if we're being grateful about little things, it takes us to the big picture. So gratitude is really a great key here. See, what it's going to always try and do is always going to try and have you make a big deal about a little thing.
Right. Right. And my work now is a lot of around threat assessment. And so there are these...
Now, isn't that perfect?
Yeah.
A guy with that karma makes a big deal about little things.
Yeah.
So
And so there's opportunities every day for me to get into that cycle that we're describing now.
So you need to get into multiple perspectives on it.
Right.
It's almost kind of go, oh, this is going on.
Right.
Step into the bathroom. He steps like Superman steps into the phone booth, and he's gone.
Right.
Okay.
And one thing that's helpful...
How would wide tolerant look at this? Okay. See, because you're so innately close tolerant, you're not going to go, oh, who gives a shit? That's not what's going to happen.
Right.
You're just going to go, all right, what's the bigger picture here? See? And so that's part of why you're in this, is to learn that. Is to learn to find that bigger picture in the midst of a kind of compulsive dwelling on all the minutiae, the small picture, or making a big deal about the small things. So just counteract it. Just the intention of doing that can do that. I'm not saying you have to do that little technique I showed you. I just showed you that so you could have the experience, because that works. But I'm just saying, getting more wide tolerance is going to help you. And a lot of this is you just got to outlast this. You're just being stretched like crazy spiritually. And it's very uncomfortable.
Part of what I
Having trouble talking right now, huh? Because see what I did with it, what I was doing with him is in the spirit world, while he was talking, we were talking to him in the spirit world, and we were basically telling him in the soul body exactly what we're talking about. And in the soul body, we were talking about to him was saying, you're coming into the I'm not. And that's really hard for the I, to come into the I'm not.
can I expect to have an understanding of that down the line a little bit?
Yeah. Other people
So-
other people understood it because they're
So
not. See, we're taking this beyond an event and a karma, it's not mine. You're starting to go more into the place of it's not me, even to the point of I'm not me, and there is no me. See,
Even right here.
yeah. Now, how did I know he was going to have trouble talking? Because in the spirit world, I was with him in the soul realm, and we were doing this. We're educating him on that level. And as he got that message, I could see that. I could just see, wow, because his soul got it, and I saw the ripple effect down through. Remember, I described how I look at all the levels. I saw the ripple effect down through all the levels, and when it hit the level of his consciousness, it was like confusion. So then he was trying to go in his mind to ask a question, because that's a comfort to the mind, to his consciousness, because that's what it does. But he was sitting there going, because of where he was. And see, that's an example of a description of how the Spirit's working. And the Spirit's doing this all the time. It's doing it, when you guys go to other workshops, you go to a USM class and you go, wow, I came out amazing. Well, this is going on, you're just not seeing it. But by talking about it, it allows you to start to become more conscious and to have a glimpse into the greater game that's afoot, which is the game of transformation of consciousness. And there's big boys playing here. Now he's really having a hard time now because the archangel came in and he's just...
I'm pretty quiet
Yeah.
inside.
Well, but see, he's not fighting it now. So he's quiet, but I'm pretty quiet now, but he didn't feel the unrest in his... When he said that, he didn't feel the unrest in him, because when the archangel came in, he accepted it. And kind of way the archangel took him into another place. You see, actually soul traveling right now took him into another place. And it's done. It was just kind of giving you, it's almost like what happened is, see, we're stretching, coming back, but what they'll do is in the inner world, they'll stretch you first in the spirit, and then they'll come down and they'll stretch you in the next level. For those people that did USM, you remember Ron and Mary talk about there's a change, and then it has to create a change on the next level, change. So that's been like a long time since I did USM, like 23 years ago or 25 years ago I graduated, but I still remember. But that's actually what happens. But it actually shifts on the spirit first, and then everything happens in spirit first. And so it ripples down. So right now he's been stretched in the spirit, and the rippling is coming down, but they also came in with a comforting to help him to accept it. Now he'll walk away from this later and may not understand one damn thing that was said. That's not so bad, because I have that all the time. Feel how solid you feel in your body right now?
Yes.
Oh,
Feet on the ground.
yeah, real grounded, because it anchored in for you. Everything's good.
I just really want to say in this moment and in past how deeply appreciative I am for you in my life.
Well, my pleasure to share with you. The kingdom of heaven is at hand for you. Don't. I know you love me and you want to share that love for me, but you should stay present with what you got right now. It took you right in there. Your prayer's been answered.
Thank you.
It's going out to other people if they want to jump in too, because see, the door is open here. To anybody who can go as high as you want, as the Spirit will take people. It's just like a conduit opens up. I'm a mouthpiece for a process. Okay. I love you too.
Love you.
You have a Wicca energy on you, just like a kind of witchcraft. But you need to let that go. Came into you from your mother when you were very young. You were about 6 years old and you started to assert your independence. And you started to tell her the things you knew. And some of the things you knew were about life beyond the world she was comfortable relating to. She was very threatened by that. So she did a kind of witchcraft upon you. They call it Wicca, which is kind of a nice name for it. But it's a form of control. It's like, I'm controlling you, but it's for your own good. Okay? So we're just going to release that from you right now. Because you have a lot more insightfulness about the spirit world than you're letting yourself know and letting yourself share. You were one of the first among the seers, going back to King Solomon's court. And you had an angel that overshadowed you that time that gave good counsel. And you just said he'll work with you again, and so will others from the spirit world. Not so much as a channel like somebody who disappears and talks, but somebody who'll just find insightfulness and understanding will pour from you without so much calculation. So this is why I used you as the example of the calculation earlier. See, Spirit was already setting you up for this. See, I'm such a puppet here. I'm so orchestrated by a higher power here. So that more the spontaneity thing for you is going to be the avenue more for you in this and the time ahead. And this insightfulness will help many people and help you. And it will help to shift an outlook inside of you, because you've had a little bit of a morbid outlook you've been fighting with all your life, really going back to your mother. And over time, and you've made some breakthroughs with it over the last few years, but it's going to shift it a whole nother level. You're going to more automatically look to the good than to the bad. So you didn't really answer the question, but that's what the Spirit had for you. But I'm kind of finishing what I started with you before when I singled you out like that. I'm tying that up. Now, isn't God so amazing, His Spirit that orchestrates that, throws out a comment and later comes back and picks that up? That's why the desire to control and desire to know is such a foolish thing to have, because the greatest thing to do is to give it up into the I don't know. I don't know. To give over, because then let the higher power do the magic and the mastery. Because it's so much more capable than we could ever be, because it knows all the angles and it knows everything. And down here, we can't possibly. We calculate. And we fall short. My light just moved. Should we do something else? More questions? I'm on pause because I get taken up. So I'm in the heavens waiting for instruction for what's next. So they're going to work with the group. I don't know what my part will be, so I'm just going to go along. They're saying they're working with a group healing of. This might just be a listening process. I'll tell you what I hear, and we'll see what happens. This is me learning too. There's like a collective disbelief that has been propagated upon the consciousness of many people, most people actually on this planet, which goes back to an illusion. That goes back to an illusion that was put forward by the negative power having to do with death and rebirth. There's a fear of dying and there's a fear of being reborn. See, without realizing it, the mindset that says, we're trapped here, we got to get out, we have to escape this world, plays into the hand of that would trap you here. Because the way you get out, more than anything else, is to love it all. But the more you fall into the belief, the mindset that says, I'm trapped in this terrible place, and I suffer here, and I never get what I want, but boy, if I could just be done with this place, I go into Shangri-La, and, I get my 77 virgins, and well, whatever it is for whatever it is for any group. But, John Rogers' great thing is peace is the cessation of againstness. So it's the release of againstness that sets us free here. But the negative powers promoted the idea that we have to be against dying. And that's easy for us to go. Remember we talked about fatality, because for all the people that fear that there's nothing after it. And the flip side is we have to be against rebirth, because that means we're failing. That means we're stuck. When you come to that place in that time of rebirth or not, the paradoxical thing is that decision isn't made here, it's made in the spirit. And when you make that decision in the spirit, you will make that decision according to the highest good. You make it to the highest alignment. You will know. You will know. I've been through this. I went through this in this life when I chose to come back. And I can't say I haven't had some regrets. But the learning and all that is I would still make the same choice, because of course you make the same choice, because you know. It's important for people to understand that the goal should always be to wake up, always to become conscious, to become aware. And what are we becoming aware of? We're becoming aware of loving. We're becoming aware of God. We're becoming aware of the kingdom of heaven. We're becoming aware that what Jesus said, he said 3 great things that were amazing. He said, seek first the kingdom of heaven, and all things will be added unto you. And then he said, the kingdom of heaven is within. So go within. And then he said, the kingdom of heaven is at hand, which means it's already present. It's like where John Rogers says, Berush Beishan, the blessings already are. He's saying the same thing. Well, the blessings already are, then we already have God. We just have to come awake to the whole thing. So we change the paradigm of what we're playing called. It's all about waking up. It's not all about, prison break on planet Earth. Like, it's called, from a preferential standpoint, we want to get beyond the confining experiences of karma. We want to get beyond the limiting things where we're repetitively going over the same thing over and over again and not getting a different result, which is, of course, insanity. We want to get beyond all that. But getting beyond all that, we don't want to go into the againstness. We don't want to fall into the trap of pushing against the world and reality with againstness, pushing against our life, looking at our life as something to be escaped to get to the better life. We want to find the betterness that's in our life. We want to find the wholeness and the completeness in the life we have. Now, that is not saying we want to go the other way and just not and just so get lost in the temporal pleasures or the temporal distractions so that we, chase the world and chase the things of the world. That's not what we're saying. This is where Buddha was such a master, because he was illustrating and talking to people about this balance between these two things. But his teachings, again, got corrupted into, if you go over and look at what they're doing now, into too much of this againstness, against the life, against the reincarnation, against that. We're not for reincarnation, we're for God consciousness. That's the idea. So in a sense, are we against the reincarnation? Yes, but you don't use the word against. We'd prefer to finish. But it's this shift of consciousness. Now everybody, of course, has their own choice about how to deal with this. But this is what I'm being offered to share with you, that the Spirit's working to change this so people can come to the higher understanding that God is present and just come out of the dream and wake up. And anybody who wants to wake up, awakening is offered. It's always offered. Everybody wants it, everybody can have it. And the call power really did not like me saying all that, because it's making one of its rare movements where it's making itself obvious. But see, it's never about what we're doing, it's how we're doing it. It's how we relate to the issue. It's how we do life. Not life is good or bad. It's how we do it. And that's the way into the kingdom. Forevermore. Amen. That's pretty good. How are we on time? Oh, no. All right. No time, right? All right, let's see. Somebody over there has a basic self and rebellion they want to deal with. So it's probably going to help understand the basic selves better. Who in the world is it? I know it's over there, but there's so many hands. Everybody's projecting the light into their hands. So there's rebellion in your basic self. And they're going to use you probably to help teach a lot of people, but there's a fear in you about not getting what you want. And that fear inside you moves from between an instinctive level of response in you and a cerebral response. So it kind of moves back and forth. And the more instinctive level of it, well, let's say it. Yeah, okay, we can go with that. You have a past karma we're using pagan practices to petition the world, the gods, the environment, the moon, the stars, the sun, the rocks, the sea, the sand. And through them to influence and to convince or coerce the people around you to give you what you want so you could have the life you want. Okay? And you were very adept at this. I mean, you were a high priestess of this at one point, and people marveled at how things seemed to come about the way you seemed to want them. So that then gave you an aptitude at creating or manifesting, which said, I'm really good at getting things done. I'm really good at getting my way. I'm really good at envisioning an outcome and then making that outcome come about. And the truth is that was true. You were very good at doing it in that way. However, that way had complications and deficiencies to it. First of all, it was involving you in with energies and approaches to things that not bad things, but are certainly less than the higher spirit that you're capable of playing with and that your heart wants to play with. So these things coming to you, it's like you got so good at doing that, and now you're around higher energy fields that come forward to work with you and to utilize you, and your conscience keeps wanting to flip back to this other thing because it works so well and you're so good at it, or versus this other thing that keeps feeling the urge to let go and give in and trust and surrender to this other thing that you can't see, like you could see this. You can see the stars and the moon and the sun in the sky, but this is not. It's not visible like that. You can know it, but you can't see it. You can know it because it's so. You can know it because it's all there is. But how do you know it? I can't see it with my eyes. I can't touch it. So here's one of the real interesting things about seeing things. When you see physically, you see, feel, taste, touch, smell, etc. You use the senses of your physical body. So then when we deal with extrasensory perceptions, we're then seeing with the sensing capacities of the level that we're moving to. So if we use the blueprint, and there's different blueprints people use, but if we use the blueprint that I like to use, because I found it works for me, is the one that John Rogers suggested, that above the physical we could talk about an astral or imaginative reality, and then an emotional reality, or causal realm, and a mental reality, and then a more unconscious, or called the etheric, but it's more of a complicated, both symbolic and void in its nature. And then we get into the spiritual dimension where we have the soul and then the spirit. So here's an interesting thing. So if I want to see with an extra sense, if I tap into the astral form, because see, when I began, I talked about the soul coming into the life. The funny thing is that when we had God and spirit and soul, and then the soul comes into the world, our mind wants to go, okay, the soul left the soul and came into the world, but actually it's more like the soul extended a small part of itself into the world to give life to the form. It's almost like if I'm the soul, I take my finger, I stick it in that glass of water, now I've taken a body and now I'm in the world. The far greater part of the soul is still in the soul. So, but once I stuck it down, I stick it down through all the different levels, from that soul level to this ethereal, unconscious level, to the mental level, to this emotional level, to this imaginative level, and into the physical level. So on each level, I have existence, and what happens, because the soul's energy is so pure, there is a form that's created around that energetic in each of those levels. So in a sense, it is the body the soul holds on each level. The human aura is, in a sense, the way we see that, the reflection of that. So if I move above the physical level and I start looking at things through the sensing of the astral body, I'm going to have a certain level of perception of it. I'm probably going to see it better, more picturing. Remember, imagination, making pictures. And then if I move into the causal level, which really should be the causative, because it's really, in a strange way, the first level. The causal level, I'm going to have a more emotional sense of it. And then if I move into that next level, that mental level, I'm going to have more of a mental understanding level of it. And if I move more into that ethereal or unconscious level, I'm going to see it probably more symbolically or metaphorically. Then if I move into the soul level, now I'm getting above all those things. I'm going to see it more directly, which is the good news. But there's the bad news that goes with that, to see it from that level. And then if I get above the soul and start to see it directly from the spirit, it's really bad news and really good news. So what's the bad news and the good news? The good news, the higher I get, the more I know it completely. If you see spiritual sight, you just know. So remember I told you earlier my work was to teach intuition and inner knowing. Spiritual sight is inner knowing. You know. You see how fast when I'm working I'm doing it, because I'm doing it from the spiritual sight. It's like bang, 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 because the knowing is there. So there's the good news. The bad news is that if I'm going to use the senses of a formless place, the senses of a being, see, when I get to the soul and above, get above the soul, it's formless. So I'm going to use the senses of a formless place. Guess what? I'm using I'm sensing from a formless place formlessly. See, what's the problem with that? It's very hard. How do I say it? You don't easily make pictures. You don't easily make sounds. You don't because why? Because none of that exists there in the way you do here. That's why it's much easier to be clairvoyant in the lesser way of making pictures and seeing things or hearing sounds or all that, because the sensing capacities of those levels give you great aptitude to make sounds and to relate to those and have those feelings. That's why there's a lot of people that are clairvoyant in that sense. There aren't a lot of people that have spiritual sight, because to have spiritual sight, you have to wake up to the reality of yourself as spirit. And you have to start getting beyond, certainly beyond the limitation of the illusion of space, but also, as we're saying here, the illusions of time. So this is a bigger part of where this all plays out. I was about to go share something else, and the Spirit pulled me off it, so I'm maybe not going to talk about that. Or maybe it will. Now, there was something else I thought I might talk about today, and that I'm waiting to see if that's it. Oh, that's what they want to talk about. So there's a lot of people in this room that are doing the spiritual progression path and moving up through levels. And if you read the ancient scriptures of, like the Yogic Sutras of Patanjali, for example, which is a classic Indian text about yoga, for example, and they talk about as the devotee moves towards enlightenment, or to the Atman, which is their word for the soul, as he gets close to it, he will be offered all the powers, the clairvoyance, the seeing, the this, the that, the ability to tell the future, to this or that. And if he takes those, he will not reach the Atman. Now, why would they do that? Because to have that, you have to start utilizing and getting more engaged with the sensing capacities of the soul in these lower levels, which will occupy you into that and lock you into it. And then what happens when people do that, sometimes is they get really good at it. They get masterful at it. And lo and behold, they still keep coming back into the world and growing, and pretty soon called, yeah, I'm great at this, but my life is empty. I'm missing something. There's got to be more. Where's God? And they start to move up towards God, and they go, yeah, but I can't quite get through. Well, why can't they get through? Because it's like, that trap they have where they stick the candy in the fruit in the bottle, and he can get his hand through, but he can't get his hand out with the thing. He sticks his hand in the bottle and he gets caught, and he won't let go of his prize, and so they catch the monkey. That's what they do. It's the same principle. You get caught in that prize you don't want to let go of, and in this case, the prize you don't want to let go of is ability. It's talent. It's a capability on another level that you mastered another time and you exercised and got very proficient at and very good at. You got so good at it that it really worked for you. The problem is that now it becomes the baggage that you can't go on. So the dilemma inside you is, at a deeper level, is you've been called to give up something that really worked for you but won't work for you where you're going. And this is why a lot of people, have asked me over the years, oh, teach me, I want to learn, I want to learn this. But I look into I really just go to the Spirit, and most of the time what the Spirit just says is called, it's not their time, because their ambition is all about they want ability. So they're seeking power. And they can get caught by that. So here's the funny thing about this whole thing. Anything we seek that is less than loving, any goal we have that is not loving, to be loving, to know loving, to be more loving, we are potentially corruptible in that. The negative power can play and find a way to try and seduce us to that. Now it'll fool us because we'll say, well, I want to have this ability because then I'm going to go help all these people, and that would be a really loving thing to do. But as soon as we get caught into the game, so therefore I'm going to work hard to get these abilities, we're in the danger of getting caught. See, now we're going for the ability. Even though in our mind we're saying, no, it's to help these people. We're saying the means will justify the ends. That's why the target is always the other thing. The big game that we get trapped in as people spiritually progressing and seeking greater consciousness, greater awareness, and spiritual freedom is we will get offered these things more and more. And sometimes in our lifetimes when we got offered, we took them up on it and we became very accomplished. And so this is something that you're in a process of letting go here. And it's an inner thing where you're just being given a chance to let go and live in a more surrendered state and operate into the flow of surrender. And that's a hard thing to do when you've gotten really good at rowing the boat. So, but I'm like on the Olympic oars team. I can paddle so fast. No, if you're going to, this one you just put your hands in the boat. You can whistle a song. You can tap dance, but the boat's going and you're just going down the river. Well, what if I don't know if the boat's going right? Well, yeah, I'm really good. We'll go faster if I row too. No. Just let go and let God. It's a surrendered state. So you can just breathe in. You've been kind of taken into that while I'm talking to you. You probably noticed that. Working a lot of consciousness in the room because it's applied to a lot of you. I've had different variations of this. It's a big trap. And as you start getting closer to the Spirit, this is often sort of the ace in the hole of a negativity. I've seen a lot of people with a lot of high consciousness get turned to the last minute and not really make it because they got attached. Actually, one of my best friends and one of my mentors, I watched in the spirit world and saw where he got caught. He got caught in the etheric and the tremendous ability and power. But if you settle for that, you get that. See, life is like this. This planet is like this. There's a bizarre truth about things when something's really heartfelt for you and you're really going for it and it's like, this is what I really want. Inevitably, this planet and the way this is set up here, they will offer you something less to see if you'll settle for it. And if you will, you'll get it, but you won't get the thing you're after. And that is a big part of karma. Karma is that we would take that's less than what we really want.
I feel like I've been aware of this over the last few years, and the challenge inside of myself has been that there is this part of me that, like, I don't want to want anything here. I'm so aware that I know the love, and that's what I want all the time. And actually being in USM right now is wonderful because I'm able to more consciously still choose the world, still have wants, and I'm learning how to, what is God's will, not my will.
You're going to have wants. See, when we came into this world, the soul by its nature, remember we talked about God, spirit, soul. So remember, the soul's just extending a part of itself. The greater part of it is still with God, and they're still in the spiritual dimension of things. And so by its nature, it is so lofty and it is so accepting that if the soul was just here, and that's why you get people who are really awakened spiritually sometimes, and it's kind of like, what do you want? They get this kind of, I mean, it's one of those things that happens as people really start to work out their karma. They kind of go, well, it's all kind of the same. So what happens, I mean, we've got to remember, the souls wanted to come here to have the adventure, to get the e-ticket for the ride at Disneyland, to put on the 3-dimensional goggles and jump in. right? Space Mountain. We wanted that. And so we are given aid in that process principally through two avenues that sometimes some has been talked about, not for everybody in the room, but certainly the people in MSI have totally learned about it. USM not so much. It's one of the more complicated things to explain. But what happens is you're given a higher self, which will be your ally through your life, which knows the soul's goal before it comes in of what that path is and what the soul wants to accomplish and how it wants to live and gain through the experience of tangibility or experience of a body. And so it's always a voice there suggesting a guidance that will keep us most on the path so we maximize our time here. And then we're given that wonderful consciousness that we often call the basic self or the lower self. And it is a consciousness that is geared to this world. It is geared to the senses. It is the consciousness that ties us in through our senses. And it pulls the soul's focus into life. I tell people sometimes the funniest thing, when my children were little, one of my little ones was there, and we were in the backyard, and he was naked, and he was parading around in this little hat. He was the cutest thing. And back then, he had this ability to look at you and give you an experience of God. He could toiji you, in a sense. I mean, it was just like you look in his eyes and go, oh my, I'm being taken out of my... And he turned around, smiled at me, and he was and I was like, oh my God, I'm looking at this little guy. And while he's doing that, he's reaching down with his hand. I kind of snapped out, looked down. He'd reached down, he'd picked up a dog turd and was about to put it in his mouth. So, and I was there, I go, oh my God, there it is. The soul was looking through, and the basic self was sensually exploring the world.
Yeah, I
And
really
they were
relate to
both
that.
there.
Yeah.
And they both are there. And so this wanting to not want, I remember when I first got around JR and MSI, that was one of my first things was, oh yeah, I realized I want to not want. But how would I do that? But you're going to have a level with you that will continue to want as long as you hold the flesh. The real question is, and the real problem is not wanting. Wanting is actually an extraordinary power in us. The power of desire is such an extraordinary thing. When we turn that power of desire towards anything, we move mountains, we do amazing things. That's, the woman that picks up the car of something. That's the thing that penetrates and takes you to the heart of God. It's that desire in a strange sort of way. Desire is a power within us. It's just we don't want it to run us. We don't want to be run by that nature. So we're still going to have the wants, because as soon as we picked up the body, we're going to want. I mean, I think John Roger talked about the idea that on every level below the soul, that we are takers. The body takes in nourishment for survival and food and water, and emotionally we take in comfort. Mentally, we're always taking in information. So these levels within us are going to be attracted to all this and going to want things from it, want to get engagement with it. Now, as we wake up and we realize ourselves as beyond physicality and beyond the body, as consciousness itself, the power of that over us will change. But as long as we maintain form, we will still have it. And a paradoxical thing about it is that when you start to get really high spiritually, if you're going to stay in the world in a bizarre sort of way, you may have to increase the power of wanting. And sometimes one of my quotes that I often use is, for a tree to grow taller, it must sink its roots deeper. About 15 years ago, my original agreement of my karma was done, and I was dying. I was actually witness to, in the spirit world, to God and Lucifer discussing my fate. And then shortly after that, I got sick. And one night I was dying. I went out of my body. I was really, really sick. And I was looking down. I was happy. Because I was fine with it. I was looking down. It's going to end. And then it was called, well, but we'd like you to stay. You're done, however. And when certain beings come and make requests of you, it's like you say, oh, well, I'd tell them no. Yeah, right. But for me to come back, I had to make agreements. And the agreements to come back were agreements that would tie me into the world. I agreed that I would get married, I'd have a family, and I agreed that I would take care of John Roger. Those were my agreements. Then, of course, they started adding things on. But not at first. But why did I need that? Because I needed that so that I could stay. Because I needed that thing. Because it would personalize me. It would attract me. It was karma. We need, to be in the world, we need karma. We just don't want to let the karma run us in a way that takes us away from higher purpose. We can't be here without that. So karma is not our enemy, but being run by the karma or controlled by the karma, that's what we want to change. So it's okay to have the wanting. This is again where Buddha was such a great teacher about that, because he was always teaching about the balance of that wanting. You know, anybody who's never read Siddhartha, I mean, it's a pretty amazing book. Kind of woke me up when I was about 17. But that book really captures a lot of what he was trying to say. A lot more often than some of the Buddhist teachings that are out there now. Because it was really about finding this balance, finding this, losing the againstness to any part of it, but also going through the place where he was controlled by any of it. So we're always looking to be in it but not of it, participatory but not dominated or controlled by those places in us. Then a mastery for us is like surfing, where it's a balancing. It's always about a balancing. And so we're learning to do that and then sharing what we learn. So stop fighting it. Just take it as a power. What's that old quote from your John Roger that's so perfect? Every stumbling block becomes a stepping stone. So our desires are like that. We turn them to a source of empowerment.
About a week ago, I actually sat down and I was writing out all the things that I want to try and, I guess, get more aligned consciously with what's for me and kind of what are the wants that are kicking my ass. And I guess I'd love help in being able to discern those, and the example that comes forward is that there is this drive in me that I struggle with, and it's about my body image and like this want to be beautiful and thin. And it's
that's a karmic carryover from another lifetime where you were privileged to be the belle of the ball, and you separated yourself from people because of that and isolated yourself and held yourself above others. And so you have the karma of commonness.
And I've been aware of that. Well, that kind of just made sense to me, why I had this unbelievable drive just to, and to also have that judgment inside of myself, to really judge people on those levels. And so, what I got out of it was that it was here to teach me. It was here so that, because it's always in my face, it's like, how can I, and the thing that I've been working with is how can I communicate more with my high self and my basic self to govern that, if that makes sense.
Good luck. Instead of governing it, just know it's there and, let it be water off a duck's back. Called, oh, there you are again.
I go through a phase of embracing it, and as you say, I can create and control myself into, managing my food and exercising, and then I feel like I'm kind of doing that, and then I go through this phase of not caring and really just wanting to be God. I just want to be, and then I kind of go into not caring. So it's
Yep. It's okay with me. How many people could relate to what she described there? I mean, it's not an exclusive process. It's exclusive to you to do yours the way you do it. But we all have our own versions of that.
yeah,
You just learn to make peace with these things.
yeah,
See, when I grew up, my father's a scientist and an engineer. My parents were atheists. So I grew up with no spiritual thing. And what it gave me a mind that was very, very analytical and very doubting. Now to this day, I still have that mind. I'll walk out of here after doing this, and it's very likely, given the past, that at some point my mind will come in and doubt everything I did and everything I shared. And what the hell were you saying? And what the hell do you know? And when that first used to come to me, I was, oh God, I got to get over this doubt. And I learned, no, I'm probably never going to get rid of it. But why get rid of it? See, it's an ally to me now. See, because I go and I play in the woo-woo world. You know, I'm playing out there in all sorts of strange, far-out stuff. I'm kind of glad I have something to turn around and say, well, what's that? Why? Because it reminds me to use the criteria that I've established, which are always a criteria of workability. It's like when we learn to work or to track information, like a lot of people do muscle testing. Why? Because it's one thing to get information, but it's also a check of information. So having checks is a really good thing to do. We don't want to. I'm quoting John Rogers so much, just amazing how much he's taught me. Because you don't want to leave your brains at the door in this. This is not this path. So you keep testing and checking it out. Have your doubts. Doubts aren't bad. Have your questions. All these things serve us. We don't want them to run us, but they're not a bad thing to have. So for me, I'm kind of glad I have that because it makes me really look at it. It's made me approach all this very esoteric stuff very much with the criterion of workability. And then as you gain more awareness, more awakening, more ability, you have different criteria to track with, which allows you to go more out on a limb. Because, for example, when you can see spiritually, and in the beginning maybe you just, I get this feeling, or I muscle test this person and it says they were strong, so it must have been good, must have worked. But it doesn't have to work. I can remember sitting in a DSS class or something one time, and we'd have people working, and you're sort of in the thing where you let the person do their own process, then you kind of just are along to push their arm when they say yes. And I did it with a person who very joyfully spent 40 minutes clearing all these amazing things, and their aura didn't move in 40 minutes. Nothing happened. And I just watched it, but I was not instructed to interfere, so I let that go on. So we do need criteria, we do need tests, we do need checks. And the mind that's a good use of our mind. Now if we turn it into skepticism rather than just checking out, now we're using it against ourselves. So everything within ourselves is a usable thing. And if it's yours, like you have this, instead of going, I got to get rid of this, why don't you find ways to see how it serves you? And you will see that it has use for you. It has use for you. I'm grateful for mine. That's the one that comes to mind for me. Is just a real good example of that. Because people have been around me for a while. You say, I'm really about workability. Does it really work? Does it really change things? Because it's too easy to fool ourselves, especially when we get into the metaphysical world. Because just because we want something to be so doesn't make it so. But it does incline us to see it so. And so that's the pitfall.
Yeah, the question that I had was, is there anything that you can tell me to be able to recognize what I'm either seeing or hearing or thinking what is of spirit and what's something else?
Do spiritual exercises. You can learn the discernment faster if you can find a place in your life where you can put it to the test. See, I had a huge advantage. I started working professionally with people 34 years ago. So, and I got into this test, check, test, check, test, check. See, that's the advantage that people that work with people have if they take their work to the level where you're really working consciousness, rather than just say, like a doctor will get better as a doctor if he's working with their body, and he'll become wise and experienced and stuff, and he'll get more intuitive in that area. But when you're working the bigger field of consciousness and you're starting to get into the metaphysical side of it, testing and checking is testing and checking. So find ways to test and check. When I first started working more with consciousness, because my initial spiritual gift was really through touch, I didn't do it for many years. I actually brought it back more for John Roger. And people see me working on him because it was always there. I had that when I was 21 years old. I put my hands on people and things would happen because I had built that ability in another life. So we have different aptitudes. There's nothing's wasted inside of you. Everything can be used. You keep wanting to change yourself instead of realizing the value of who you really are. There's a treasure chest in your consciousness. God designed you so perfectly to utilize all these capacities, these innate things about you. And the more you utilize those innate things about you in the unique way that you can, the more masterful you will get. But like I was saying, when I first started, I probably used muscle testing for at least 10 years. Checked everything I did on the people. I only worked with people in person. I didn't do telephone work or anything because I had to be sure. Was I sure with that? No, but I was more sure. And then what happened is, as I was doing that, I would start to see it and know it. And then I was using the muscle testing more as a check against what I was seeing. And I had a basic rule that said, if the guidance I'm getting inside and the things that the muscle testing are showing don't sync, aren't working together, then something's wrong. Either I'm muscle testing wrong, the person's fooling me, resisting, or I'm not following the guidance correctly. And as soon as I hit that point where they weren't in sync, I would stop and check till I got them back in sync. And then pretty soon they got so in sync that I was willing to trust the guidance with that. But then I would muscle test on my hand. Well, it's just not as good as muscle testing them. And then pretty soon, and I still do. You'll still suddenly see me, if I have a question about something and I get a pause inside, you'll see me do this. You'll still see me do that a little bit. Because it's a very accomplished technique for me. And then pretty soon you just give it up. But it's trial and error, practice. And that's the same way with this whole inner discernment of working with intuition, working with the talents we have, doing all this inner work kind of stuff. It's practice. And the funny thing about that is, what's really nice to have at that point is close tolerance. See, because close tolerance can get kind of a bad name called, makes you kind of, but right then you really want to track carefully. See, I'm innately close tolerant. You can often tell that just by looking at a person's facial structure. See how close my eyes are together? That's more of an innate close tolerance. Which is funny because the work I do is so wide tolerant. But what we're really doing is you're just moving beyond tolerances and you're following a flow. So use what you have.
What I have been using is I relate to it as a feeling, but I don't know if it is a feeling, but it's when I'm in my SEs or at Grace, or I have this feeling that I would call of love. And
it's working for you pretty well. The danger there is to transfer too much to it. See, the criteria is that I like to use as a general criteria, which are the ones that I learned from John Rogers, Is joy is a sign of the presence of Spirit, and is the loving there. So I would use that, but you got to remember, the Spirit is so accepting about all this. Like people all the time come to me and bring me all these questions about, they want me to look spiritually at what they're doing, and the Spirit doesn't care. Because it isn't about the Spirit. It's about, should I have steak or chicken for lunch? I mean, it can be like that. Or it's something that really is called, and the answer is called whichever way you go, it'll be fine, because it's like on the wide road of your soul's path that your soul wanted to do. None of those choices, either one of those, they all work. Because you're still on the road. You're still on the road you chose. So it's not really something the Spirit would necessarily intercede with. You're not going off your path if you choose one or the other. It all fits. So don't start ascribing too much to feelings. Seeing above all else is the most valuable one to have. The problem sometimes people get with this, and I've watched a lot of people do this, is the seeing that I think that really applies to is spiritual seeing. And a lot of people get a lesser level of clairvoyance and say, but I saw it. Well, maybe they've opened up their astral senses and they're seeing it in their astral body. The problem with anything like that is when you're looking at things concerning this world, if you go to the next level up, the astral level, and you're looking down, you can have a level of clarity to this to a point, except a lot of things that would confuse you and deceive you might be going on the levels above. And if it has anything to do with your spiritual growth, the power in this world, remember in the diagram we talked about the call power, everything below, and that other one we talked about, the Luciferian things, they have a high agenda to distract you from your spiritual thing. So they'd love to come in and speak in your head or confuse it or try and push you to over-assume something you saw as meaning more than what it did. One of my first guidances from John Roger when I started in this 30-something years ago was, beware the tricks in the truth. Above the soul plane and the spirit, it's pretty hard to be tricked. So I never want to say you can't, because they're pretty good at tricking too, but that's a pretty clear shot. But below that, yeah. And I am so compulsively checking and watching because of all these years of looking and going up through these levels and messing with all that stuff that I still check. You'll see me when I'm pausing. Sometimes I'm just checking. I'm just resetting my bearings. I'm checking on who's there. Checking on my source. And I can do it really fast most of the time. But I just pause. Something came in and said, better check. It's a cautiousness.
So what do you mean when you say check?
I go into the, well, you go to where you go. I go into the spirit most of the time. Now, what does that mean for anybody? It means for a person, what does that mean for a person? You go as high as you can to what you know how to do. Do I go as high as I can all the time? No. Because I don't have to, because there's levels I can go to that are beyond the negative power. They can't go there, so I don't have to go all the way up. Will I go there? Mostly if I'm guided there. It really depends. Most of the time if I go there, it's because a force out of the highest forms of the spirit world wants to work here, wants to come in and work, and I'll be connected up there and I'll go up there to let that happen. Now, I just demonstrated that while I'm talking to you. Some of you may have sensed the room change a little bit. Some of you won't. Because I'm still connected to it. So when that happens, it'll start amplifying that. But for most people, the sensing of what that is a very intangible thing. At some point, it won't be. Is it intangible to me? No, it's not intangible to me. But it's not a feeling thing. It's a knowing thing. It's a seeing thing. It's direct. It's a all the time thing. It's always there. I just I don't put my focus upon it because it's not necessary. But I'm doing it because Spirit wants to demonstrate it for those in the room who can pick up on that. There's a couple people in here who got picked up with it a little bit. So And now that I said that, there's other people getting picked up because you're realizing, oh yeah, well, why hold back? But you're probably not going to, well, I saw this light or this or that, because remember, formless. But you'll know. And that's why the descriptions of these places have always been so, the peace that surpasses understanding. You know, in the Indian sound current tradition, they have different names where they describe a lot of this stuff, but I get they're going to a lot of the same places, and they don't necessarily talk about, 27 levels above the soul. They may talk about 8 or 3, but when you look into some of the masters that come out, you go, well, they were awake. But who cares what you call it? I'm happy with that reference, because that reference worked, the 27 levels, that one I know and I worked it. But I'm aware of these other ones. But no matter how you call it, it's a state of consciousness. And when you have it, you know when somebody else has it. Because when you're there, you know that they know that they're there, and you know that you're there, and you know it. Meanwhile, each of us is working to the level of that we've awakened to, and work from that. A big thing that I'm working to help support people do is to start bringing more of their awakening back forward to be utilized in their lives, because there's a whole lot of people that have awoken spiritually in terms of, let's say in terms of initiation, but they're not bringing that much consciousness back, and they could. And so, when I say I'm working towards to support that, it's not because I personally have an agenda, but the Spirit has shown me that it's time for more people to be able to walk more of that Spirit back into the world, because the work of the Spirit in this world is requiring that. The more people are being able to be conscious in the Spirit while they walk in the flesh. The true meaning of feet in the sand, head in the clouds. The true portable paradise. Now I've been holding that open for a lot of people for a while here. So so for me it starts to stretch me out a little bit. Can I do it? I could do it all day, but it's hard to talk in it. But it's where we're all going, because it's who we all are. Because when you get there and you wake up to that, everybody is already there. That's paradoxical. I don't know how to tell you, it's paradoxical. It's like when I said the soul extends a little finger in there. When you get to the soul still hasn't left there. He just put his finger down. He's still here. So if you wake up to the soul consciousness and become awake as the soul, you'll be aware of every other soul as that. If you wake up as the Spirit and wake into that consciousness, you'll be aware of the Spirit, and you'll be aware of those who are also the Spirit. And yet everybody's the Spirit. But you also start to be aware of those who are also awake to themselves as Spirit. It's just how it works. I think we're finishing with you. We kind of used you to share a whole lot of things. I told you the Spirit was going to do that.
I love you. Thanks, Michael.
Sure. How are we doing on time? Oh, so I could end now. All right, well, let's see. See if the Spirit wants to do anybody else. Oh, look at those auras. Now's where you want that power of desire. See, it's useful. Oh, I want it. What is the thing? When you want it like you want your next breath. The kingdom of heaven is present for everyone. It's present for everyone here. God is lifting the veil of consciousness that separates us and our awareness from the truth of God, from the ever-present reality of God. This is being done not because we demand it, but because the Lord who is sent to redeem the greater purpose of God Not so much as we would think to redeem us, but to redeem the plan of God and to turn it back so it works according to the higher direction set forward in the heavens in the beginning by God. Has ordained this and has set his consciousness to that purpose. And we are all available to be beneficiaries of that. The Spirit is waking us up. We're doing less about it than the Spirit is doing. The Spirit is the catalytic force that makes it all so. We can cooperate with that catalytic force, come into alignment with it, and be instruments of it if we come into enough alignment, till that purpose is fulfilled for every soul that is to be fulfilled in this time and the time to come. None of us has to do anything different than what we're doing now. But what we do is bring loving forward into everything. Because loving is the transformative truth of God. It is the power that God used to make all things and will use to make all things aligned, to return things to the balance that was meant to be. You're each part of that, whether you know it, whether you care to be part of it, because it's inherent within us. It's like a seed that is growing and was planted long ago. And there is a coming forward in this time, and an emergence of a greater knowing in this time of that which was referred to in the Bible as the New Jerusalem, which will be a time when the planet works under that Christ plan we talked about earlier. And so the way karma is worked and the way learning becomes the keynote of experience. And the balancing of law and the crime and punishment approach to living will fade away, become less and less common, and less a noxious burden upon all of us. We reach to receive this blessing, and in turn we reach to then give forth the fruit of that blessing in how we live our lives and how we manifest our heart's purpose, how we emanate that greater truth that has been given to us to share. We are each the children of God. We are each love made manifest. And we are each the Holy One, the one who walked with God in the beginning and walks with God in this moment. We're just coming awake to all that. Meanwhile, we live and suffer the adventures, the agonies, the anguishes, and the triumphs of the mortal condition. But none of us has to be more or less in that than we are. However, if we come to the awareness of the loving, inevitably, this condition we call life on earth will change for us and change for others. Because as above, so below. And so as we live in more connection to the above, we will transform the below. Not into a paradisical perfection that fits the idealism of poets and priests and other people who have an agenda to preach utopian values, but it'll come into that perfect presentation that God intended as a place where growth takes place and souls are informed of His greater purpose and His greater blessing in setting forth all that is created. All is good in God. All is good in us. We will be seeing more of the truth of this within ourselves and without ourselves. Let us be prepared for this. Let the journey ahead be one of loving. Everybody partakes as they choose to.